somehow slip up and give me some information about my kidnappers and how they planned on getting rid of me. Once they finished eating, they got up out of their chairs and walked back upstairs. I didn't get up until I heard the door to their bedroom close. I tiptoed upstairs and put my ear up to their door, but it was completely quiet. I kept my ear pressed to the door for a bit more until I felt something grab at my right foot. I yelped in surprise when I saw 2 fingers holding onto my toes. My father sneered, "You know it's impolite to spy on your parents' room, don't you?" I pulled my foot away from his grip and raced downstairs. My father came out with a small handgun and pointed it in my direction. While I ran out of the front door, I heard my father scream out to me, "Sooner or later, they're going to get you again. You running away just makes our job easier." I didn't know where I was going, but I knew that I couldn't stay at my parents' house any longer. The next 2 hours was a mixture of running and walking countless steps. With sweat pouring down my shirt despite the cold weather, I finally found a welcome sight. A cop car. I flagged the car down and Matt's head popped out of the window. He didn't ask me any questions, he just told me to get in and explain when we got back to the station. The car ride was filled with silence, which made the next 10 minutes a perfect time to fully think about what the heck was happening. My parents were definitely in on my kidnapping, but why would they send me away for 15 years, send me back home and kill me off? Why not just kill me off to begin with? As questions started to flood my head, I felt the car come to a stop. Matt took off his seatbelt and got out of the car. I followed his lead and walked into the station right behind him. We went to an office in the back of the building and took a seat in front of a desk. He sat down at the opposite end and, while crossing his arms, said, "Explain." I took a deep breath and told him all about my parents' conversation the night before. How they talked about my kidnappers will get rid of me. Then I told him about the odd breakfast and almost getting shot down by my father when he found out I was trying to eavesdrop on them. He could tell that I was still shaking from the incident, so he asked me if my father said anything at all while he had the gun in his hands. After calming myself down, I told him that he told me sooner or later they were going to find me, and also that having me run away was just helping them out. Matt wrote down a couple of things from his notepad and asked me if I wanted a coffee or some water. I told him a glass of water would be fine. As he got up and started to head out of the room, I asked him if he could get an investigator or detective or anyone that can figure this out for me. With eyes filled with pity, he told me that since we were a small town, it would take some time to get anyone else down here. He gave me a little pat on my shoulder and walked out the door. He was gone for what seemed like hours. It started as just an annoyance, but it quickly elevated to panic. I tried opening the door several times, but no matter how much I tugged at the door, it remained in the same exact spot. The world around me started to spin and I fell to the ground. I woke up to the sound of a constant beep in the background. While I opened my eyes, I saw a young lady in a white outfit standing in front of me. She smiled widely at me and asked me if I was feeling alright. No, I really wasn't. The sight of her made me freak out. I started to tear at whatever was around me. I grabbed at the pole with my IV attached to it and launched it at her. She managed to avoid getting hit by the pole and pain exploded in my right wrist. I tried to grab for her, but she hurried outside of the room. I got out of bed, but after a couple of steps, the dizziness came back and I blacked out once more. It was dark when I woke up again. I saw gauze and tape around my right wrist and the IV was now attached to my left wrist. I looked around the room and saw that there was a TV in the far right corner. A man was asleep in the next bed over and there was a little controller attached to the wire on the bed. I found a little icon that looked like a nurse and pressed it. 2 minutes later, a man walked into the room with the same white outfit. A shudder ran down my spine, but I restrained myself. I asked him to turn on some cartoons for me. He showed me how to control the TV with the remote. Before he left, I asked him if I could use his phone to log down a daily log. He hesitated for a second but handed it to me and told me that I have 2 hours with it before his shift is over. I was repositioning my pillow when I saw an envelope under my pillow. The letter M was written on the front of the envelope. I opened the envelope and took a photo of when I was 4 out. On the back there was a little note for me. "You're only alive because I'm a cop." I wanted to kill you as soon as I talked to you for the first time, but we already have people that will do that for us. Show this letter to anyone if you want. They won't listen. You're the kid that just came back home after being missing for 15 years. The crazy and unstable kid. It's my word against yours, bud. I'm logging to you from the nurse's phone, but as I got to the middle of this log, I had the feeling of being watched. I looked out of the window and saw my parents and Matt staring through the window of my room. When my eyes met Matt, he mouthed the words, "Stay." Without Matt, who can I trust now? 2 hours after my last log, I handed the phone back to the nurse and told him about a couple of people staring at me through the window. He looked out the window and turned back around with an annoyed look on his face. With a condescending tone, he said, "It's really not funny to joke around about things like that." Confused, I looked out the window and saw that no one was there. They were just there when I checked a couple of minutes ago. Where the hell did they go? I knew it would be pointless to try and convince him, so I just told him that I was tired and mistook reflections with people outside. He nodded his head and walked out of the room. It was now around 11 p.m. and I could not fall asleep. I turned on the TV and flipped through the channels, but nothing really interested me. My stomach started to growl, so I pressed the button with the nurse on it and waited around. 5 minutes later, a lady walked in and asked, "Do you need something?" I told her I was hungry and she left without saying a word to me back. 20 minutes later, she came back in with a couple of carrots and ranch. I looked at the plate with obvious disappointment and asked if they had anything else. I stared down at my plate for a couple of seconds after I asked her, and when I looked back up, she was gripping onto the side of my bed with both of her hands. Her knuckles started to become white and her breathing started to get heavier. With as much venom as she could muster, she said to me, "Listen to me, you little shit. I don't want you to eat. I want you to starve. You understand me? Eat the carrots or go hungry. I don't care. Just don't press that button again and go to sleep." She stormed out of the room and I sat there confused and worried. I put the plate of carrots and ranch on the side table. I started to get comfortable on my bed when I noticed a pair of eyes looking at me through the window. Slightly pissed off, I looked out the window. I didn't care anymore. I was just so tired about whatever the heck my parents were trying to do with me. Let my kidnappers get me again. I just didn't care anymore. Right as I lifted my hand to bang on the window, I saw what was staring at me. My father's dismembered head was placed on top of the bush. His eyes were open wide and his mouth was sewn shut. Matt was laying on the ground next to the bush with his stomach torn open, and my mother had 2 bones sticking out of her chest and head. Right as I was about to start screaming, I felt someone covering my mouth with tape. I tried to twist around, but the person holding me was far too strong. I struggled as a cloth bag was placed over my head and I flailed around as much as I could while my arms and legs were getting tied together. The person picked me up and at a very fast speed. I heard him rushing out the doors and the cold air instantly hit me. He stopped running and I heard the sound of a car trunk opening. I tried screaming through the tape, but I knew there was no way anyone could hear me. I was thrown down and the person closed the trunk door. I heard 2 doors open and shut, and a couple of seconds later I felt the car peeling out. I knew for a fact that I was going to die. There was nothing I could do. I tried to get as comfortable as I could, but the trunk was far too small. Every single minute I felt the trunk get smaller and smaller until I couldn't move my body at all. Having a bag over my head and only being able to breathe through my nose made me feel like I was truly trapped and helpless. I just wanted to die. I wanted to give up, but even that option had been taken away from me. That is when I decided to start throwing my body against anything that was in my way. I started to gain more and more space until the car came to a stop. The sound of a child's laugh brought a wave of fear across my body. Was I back at the house? Is that where I'll spend my last minutes? I heard the trunk open and they started to grab the items that surrounded my body. After a couple of minutes, I felt 2 small hands grab me by my ankles and 2 larger hands grab me by my shoulders. I tried to jug my body so they could lose their grips, but they held strong and kept carrying me. They set me down on a chair and took the bag off of my head. I found myself in a house, but not any house I've seen before. We were in what seemed like the living room. It was dark in the living room, but I could still see both of their faces. A man who looked to be struck with infinite depression and a little boy who seemed to be the happiest thing around. The boy stuck out his hand and said, "Hey bud, we're kinda the same. You lost your parents and I lost mine. It's okay. They were bad people. By the way, your mom didn't taste as good as your dad, so I didn't really want to finish off your mom, but your dad is kinda still with us." The man put his hand up to the boy and stared at me for a bit before saying, "I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but be calm. We were told to help you, so we did." I wanted to be calm, I really did, but after what the boy said, how did they expect me to be calm? I tried to think of a way to ask a question that won't set the boy off on me. Once I thought of one, I took a deep breath and asked, "So why the killing or the eating? I know they were evil, but why them and not anyone else? Why did you take me instead of just leaving me there?" The man sighed and glared at the boy. He shrunk down in his seat and muttered, "I was just trying to help." The man looked back at me and said, "We'll kill because that's what we were told to do. Sometimes we don't kill, but most times we do." The boy has developed taste through his parents. They did the same thing we do now, but they started to lose control with hunger and started killing innocent people. I don't know why they chose your parents and the cop. I really don't. They told me to take you, so we did. He stared off into the kitchen after his statement. After thinking about his answer, I only had one more question. They? Who's they? After a couple of seconds, he looked back at me, shrugged his shoulders, and pointed at a door. "There's your room. You have a phone that you can use and there is internet, but I advise against contacting anyone you know. I'm tired. I'm going off to bed." They took the ropes off of me and the boy skipped into the room next to mine, and the man sat down in the couch behind me. I had more questions, but I started to walk to my room. When I opened my room, I heard the man cough behind me. I looked back at him and he said with a tear falling from his eyes, "I lost everything. Just know that. I had a wife and a 2-year-old kid, but all of that was ripped away. I don't know what is going through your head right now, but just know that we are here to help you. Look through the phone. You'll find answers." I told him thank you and walked in my room. It had a bed and a little side table. A phone was lying on top of the side table attached to a charger. I took it off the charger and looked around the phone till I found the button to power it on. There were only 2 icons on the screen. One was for a browser, which I used to write down this log to you all. The other one was a simple looking app. A blue box with a white circle inside of it. It was called Life is Beta. I didn't feel like looking into it tonight, but I will tomorrow. I think I finally found someone to trust now. The whole day took its toll on me and I fell asleep quickly. In the middle of the night, I woke up to something hitting against my legs. I heard the boy start screaming, "What if he tastes as good as his dad? I just want a taste. Let me have a taste." The man finally got the boy calmed down and set him down on the ground. He sat in front of the boy and said, "Drew, you can't be like them. I love you like a son, but you need to calm down." They got up and left the room. I couldn't sleep at all after that. I sat in my bed and looked through the browser on my phone. Nothing really sparked my interest. It was just a bunch of shit about the new president and countless numbers of lists I must read. I closed out the browser and clicked on the Life is Beta icon. The screen went black before white letters floated around the screen. They slowly started grouping together words until they finally placed themselves in their designated spots. "We've saved your life, and all we ask is for you to make a decision." The letters started to fall off the screen and 3 words took its place. Choose, kill, be killed. I tried to leave the app, but the screen remained the same. I tried hitting the power button, but the phone would not turn off. When I took the back off of the phone, the number 5 floated on top of the word choose. The number then changed to 4 and then 3. When it hit 1, I tapped on the icon that said kill. The app closed down and I turned the phone off. I still heard the man talk to Drew in the other room, but after listening to them mumble for a bit more, I fell back to sleep. This morning I woke up to the smell of bacon. I jumped out of bed thinking I was still at my parents' house, but when I saw the log walls, I could finally calm myself down. I turned on the phone and saw the app logo flashing. When I clicked on it, I saw a character that looked exactly like me floating in the middle of the screen. He was flashing, so I tapped on him and the phone went black for a second, and then showed the character sitting in an identical bed as me. I walked out of the door and walked into the kitchen and sat down on the sofa in the living room. The animated version of the guy walked up to me and gave me a plate of bacon and scrambled eggs. The sound of knocking came from my phone. We both jumped up and the man put a finger up to his lips. He walked up to the door and saw another man walk in. He was wearing a shirt with a small cookie on the right side of his shirt. The screen went black and came back to another scene. I was done with my food and the man was talking to me. I saw the cookie shirt man take out a small pocket knife from his back pocket. Before my character could react, a knife was lodged into the middle of his head. The man ran out, leaving the knife in my head. The screen went black and came back to a white screen. Kill or be killed flashed in black letters before the app closed down. I threw the phone on the bed and walked out into the living room. There weren't any chairs in the kitchen, so I took a seat on the sofa. Sweat started to pour down my forehead, but I ignored it. This must be some kind of joke the two decided to pull on me. The man came out and asked if I was okay. I nodded yes, and he went back into the kitchen. He asked from the kitchen, "Bacon and scrambled eggs sound good?" I called back yes and sank into the couch. After a couple of minutes, he came back out with 2 plates of bacon and eggs. My stomach growled in response, but my brain kept me from being happy about a good meal with what seemed like good company. He stared at me for what seemed like hours, but he finally said, "Hey man, my name is Steven, by the way. I'm sorry if I've been mysterious so far. It's just I am handling a recent loss myself. It's not only been a little over a week, but it hurts as much as the first day. I had to leave my wife and kid, but I can only imagine how you must be feeling. I understand, man, I really do. The kid's name is Drew and he is still a bit unstable." His last sentence was cut off by the sound of knocking. I started to panic and Steven asked me what was wrong. I whispered back to him about what the app showed. Steven stared off into space for a while before saying, "Good." He grabbed a knife from the kitchen and answered the door. The man that was supposed to kill me stood in the entrance with a smile on his face. Steven said, "Good morning, Andrew. I wasn't expecting you for another 3 days." Andrew looked at him for a second and said, "Beta told me you were helping a kid out. Told me to come." Andrew started walking towards me and Steven crept behind him for a couple of paces before jamming the knife in Andrew's back. Andrew fell to his knees while Steven stabbed him 3 more times in the back. The whole entire time, Andrew laughed and pointed at me. He shouted out, "They'll find you. They'll find you and kill you like the little wimp you are." He kept laughing before taking his final breath and laid still on the ground. I heard the sound of little footsteps behind me and I looked back to see Drew grinning ear to ear. He shouted with joy, "Oh, you did it. He's dead. I can't wait to see how he tastes. My mama and daddy told me that he must be sweet from all the cookies he made and ate." Steven responded with, "No time. We need to get out of here now. Beta told me that we need to leave by 8 and it's already 7:45. Drew started to whine but followed us to Steven's car. When we were all seated in the car, Steven started speaking. "We have 1 hour. 12 miles away there is a woman. She's about to kill 8 kids in the school. We'll get her while she's walking from the parking lot to the school entrance. I'll slow down in front of her car and you guys take care of the rest." He started to drive down the road and I started to relax into my chair. I looked to my right to look out the window but see Drew staring at my chest. He breathed deeply into my ear before whispering, "I wish I didn't leave the meat back at the house." He rubbed the side of my neck with his fingers and giggled. Before I could say anything, he was back in his seat. After a couple of minutes, Steven pulled into an old parking garage. We were the only car there, and I started to get out of my chair when he parked. While I grabbed for the handle, Steven grabbed me by my throat. Drew tossed a cloth bag over my head and dragged me out. I landed on hard concrete. I grunted and started to scream. Drew laughed and then said, "Screaming won't help. There is no one around. You chose to be killed, and that's what we're here to do." They took the bag off of my face and found Drew's face incredibly close to mine. He smiled before slapping me lightly on my face. Steven looked like he was about to cry, but he managed to contain his emotions. He took out a gun from the back of his pants. He said he was sorry before putting the gun up to my forehead. I didn't want to sob or plead for my life, but I couldn't think of a different way to react. With snot and tears running down my face, I pleaded for my life. I told them that I chose to kill, not be killed, but Drew kept laughing. Steven said sorry one last time before pulling the trigger. Drew fell on my lap. I looked at Steven and he was crying. He knelt beside Drew and held his head in his hands. He wailed, "You are the only thing that replaced what my son was to me. I loved you even though I only knew you for 5 days, but please know I loved you. Please, I'm begging you. Please know that I loved you. Please." I wanted to comfort him, but I didn't know what to say. We're in a hotel now. I'm on Steven's phone. I need more answers, but I know I have a person I can finally trust. We went to a nearby forest and Steven buried Drew's body next to an oak tree. Steven cried throughout the whole process. Once he put the last scoop of dirt over the makeshift grave, he fell on his knees and started to sob. I thought about patting him, but decided he just needed his own space. After a couple of minutes, Steven got up and started to walk towards his car. I followed behind him and got in the passenger side. For the next hour, all I heard was the heavy breathing by Steven. His eyes were bloodshot red and his hands gripped the steering wheel a little tightly to the point where his knuckles had turned white. He pulled into a small restaurant and we got out and walked inside. The lady in the front took us to a table and he ordered the bacon and egg special. I ordered the same thing and she carried our menus away and walked up to the cook. I looked around the restaurant. We were the only ones there, but the restaurant seemed to be doing fairly well. All of the TVs were newer and the seats were almost completely new. The kitchen looked to be very well maintained. The color red seemed to be the theme of the restaurant. The seats, the tables, and the kitchen walls were all red. I enjoyed that color, but I thought to myself about how I would have replaced the color from red to blue. I didn't realize how hungry I was until I saw the feast before my eyes. I started to devour every single salty strip of bacon and eggs. Halfway through my meal, I felt my phone buzz. Steven heard my phone buzz and started to stare at me when I decided to keep eating instead of checking the phone. When he realized I had no intentions of checking, he said, "I really recommend checking the phone. That's why you're still alive. It saved you from Andrew and Drew." He went back to his meal while I reluctantly took my phone out of my pocket. When I turned on my phone, it automatically went to Life is Beta. My character was glowing and floating in midair. Underneath his body, New Experience appeared. I clicked the body and the screen showed my character standing in the same type of table I was. The screen slowly started to pan away from my character and went to the kitchen. There was a man lying on the floor, gagged and tied up. He was flailing around the floor and his legs were mostly cut out. The cook walked up to him and bent down next to his body. He used his knife to cut off part of his thigh. When he cut out a sizable piece, he started to remove the fat from the meat. Once he was done removing the fat, he put the fat on the stove and cooked the bacon with it. He threw the meat in the trash can and focused on the bacon. The man on the ground started to sob, but the cook walked up to him and jammed his foot on the guy's mouth. The screen went black again and bounced back to my character. My character got out from his chair and started to walk out. Steven's character tried to catch up to mine, but he was far too slow. The cook came out and grabbed Steven by the back of his shirt. Steven tried to fight him off, but the cook was far too strong. On the next scene, Steven looked like he was there for days. His arms and legs were peeled off to the bones and the cook looked hungrily at his midsection. The last thing I saw was the cook plunging his knife into Steven's chest and pulling the knife down. After that, my phone screen went back to my home screen. I wanted to leave. I knew that was the only way to save my ass, but I just couldn't leave Steven here to die. I didn't eat another bite of my breakfast, but I waited till Steven was done. Once Steven was done with his meal, we went back to his car and drove away. After enduring the silence for over an hour, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I saw that we had parked outside of a huge 3-story brick house. He got out of the car and motioned me to follow him inside. I walked up beside him right as he knocked on the front door. A man in a monkey mask answered the door and panic started to take over me. I tried to run away, but Steven grabbed me by my right shoulder. He calmly said, "Hey Grant, am I here early?" The man in the monkey mask shook his head no and said, "Come inside, it's cold." Steven started to walk inside, but when he saw that I hadn't moved a muscle, he grabbed my arm and dragged me in with him. A flood of memories hit me like a tidal wave. The woman dressed in all white that would come into our rooms. She would start by rubbing my thighs and telling me everything was okay. She would then start showing me pictures on her phone of men lying on the ground in several impossible positions. Men with their arms around their right knee and the hand sticking inside halfway through his mouth, and men with half of their midsection cut off and their tongue on the middle of their thighs. One guy that would come into our house with a knife in his hand. He would say, "Are you the one?" before finding the right boy and plunging the knife into his chest. They gave us schooling every week, but on Wednesdays they would tell us the best way to end a person's life. In the middle of my thoughts, Steven grabbed his pocket knife out of his back pocket and plunged it into Grant's neck. As Grant started to cough up blood, Steven tossed me his keys and shouted, "Go!" I didn't want to leave him there. I really didn't. In the last couple of days, he was the only one that I have grown to trust. The only one that I have felt was actually family. He had taken down 4 people before getting stabbed dozens of times by 3 other people. I knew I couldn't help him. I knew that the only person I have loved is now dead. I ran to his car and started up his engine. I watched him while he drove his car, but no matter how long I watched him drive, I managed to wreck his car within the first 10 minutes I drove it. I couldn't find any building to find shelter in. I decided to sit next to an oak tree. Drew may have been a messed up child, but that was how he was raised. That was the truth he grew up believing. Steven had a normal life until he found the app. I only had a taste of a normal life through the app. I know it may seem like a bad thing, but I owe Life is Beta my life. They have showed me what it truly felt like to have someone truly love you like family. In the middle of writing this out to you all, I've had 2 notifications. One being from Life is Beta. It was just a simple quote. "Though 3 gave their life for our cause, 14,000 have joined today to kill. We will grow and we will make the world a better place." The next was the sound of people mimicking monkey noises all around where I sat. I'm sorry I couldn't help get rid of them or find every single answer I wanted to get. But now I appreciate life. My life and everyone else's. Steven couldn't get rid of them, but the 14,000 will make a bigger impact. If you find the app Life is Beta on your phone, don't think twice. Please choose kill.
Number 14.
My old college roommate Dylan lives just outside of Denver. Like most Colorado natives, he loves to camp. The crazy kind of camper who does it all year, even in December. Whenever he goes to the mountains alone, I have him check in with me just in case. I'm worried about him, so I'll get right to it. His text messages are starting to scare me. The following is our latest text conversation. 2:30 p.m.
Yo, I just parked my car. Heading to the trail now.
You're crazy, man. How cold is it?
Not bad, actually. 30s. You gotta come out here soon. It's beautiful.
Ha! We'll see in spring when it warms up. Have fun, man. Watch out for staircases in the forest.
Nice, dude. Real funny.
7:44 a.m.
Dude, are you up?
Yes, sir. You okay?
This is so weird. I woke up this morning and there's someone else out here.
On the mountain? Looks like you're not the only winter camper. LOL.
No, not a camper. I can see them on the horizon, but they haven't moved, like, at all.
What?
I don't know, it definitely looks like a person, but they haven't moved. They're probably 300 yards away, but standing completely still.
That's super creepy, dude. Keep me updated. 9:19 a.m.
They still haven't moved. I made breakfast over the fire and acted like I didn't notice anything. I'm gonna check it out.
Let me know. Maybe it's a stump or something? 9:33 a.m.
Dude. It's a freaking scarecrow.
What? Like a farmer scarecrow?
Yeah, man, what the hell other kind of scarecrows are there? Its clothes are weird, though.
How so?
The clothes are modern. It's wearing a nice black jacket and jeans and stuff. Face is kinda scary. Burlap sack with black eyes and a huge smile stitched on. Why is this thing out here? I'm tempted to steal its North Face jacket. I posted a pic of it on my Snap story if you want to see what it looks like.
I don't know, dude. I'd leave it alone. Maybe it's some sort of conservation study or something? Like, to see if bears will attack it? You might be on camera, and I know you have weed and shrooms on you.
Good point. Speaking of which, time to pack a bowl.
Have fun. 3:33 a.m.
Someone is outside my tent.
I'm sure.
Dude, please, this is serious. I can see their shadow.
Call the police, Dylan.
No, I don't want to make any noise. They probably think I'm asleep. I have my knife. I'm texting inside my sleeping bag so they can't see my phone light. I thought I heard a noise and I woke up. I guess I didn't zip up my tent all the way and I assumed it was the wind. But then I saw the silhouette.
What the F, man? Should I call the police for you? Where are you? Latitude and longitude, now. Dylan, dude, please respond and drop a pin so I know where you are. 6:56 a.m.
I'm alright.
Thanks for finally responding. Just about had a heart attack. Barely slept. I was going to call the police or ranger station, but I don't know where you're at.
There's something weird, though. The scarecrow is right outside my tent. Someone put it there last night while I was asleep. That's the shadow I saw. I don't like this at all.
Go home, man. Seriously. That's messed up, even if it is a joke.
I'm about 4 miles from my car. I'll text you when I get back to it. Also, I forgot to mention something.
What?
My hat was on top of the scarecrow this morning. Someone must have gone into my tent last night while I was asleep and put my hat on its head.
Text me ASAP. That was earlier. Hopefully he gets back okay. 3 dots. It looks like he's responding. 9:13 a.m.
Oh, crap. Someone slashed my tires. And there's another scarecrow by my car. I've been working with the Denver Park Rangers and police. They're not telling me anything. They said that they have the situation under control. I am not convinced.
Here's my last conversation with Dylan. 9:25 a.m. Please tell me you're calling the police.
Hang on. I'm gonna see how bad a shape the car is in, and yes, I'm calling them.
Alright, let me know ASAP. 11:45 a.m. What's going on? 12:30 p.m.
We'll text later. Not safe.
Dylan, please let me know what's going on. 2:15 p.m.
Alright, I have a second to catch you up. I can call you, but I have to keep my voice low. This is so messed up, dude. I don't know what to do. I don't want to be here. Also, my iPhone is dying and I'm gonna have to switch over to the crappy flip phone I use for work.
WTF, dude, what do you mean by not safe?
So I went to try to start my car to get a quick charge on my iPhone and see how bad the tires were. The engine wouldn't even turn over. The scarecrow was standing right in front of my car, like a foot away. It smelled so bad, dude. Like rotting meat. I called the police and told them about the car, and that I was stuck. They transferred me to the ranger station to explain where I was for assistance. That's when it got weird.
What do you mean?
The ranger seemed pretty lax about it at first, like, "Where are you? Stay calm, we'll send help, just stay where you are, etc." Monotone voice like he's used to it. Then I mentioned the scarecrow, and the ranger was different.
Different?
He became really serious and panicked. Here's how it went.
Did you say scarecrow?
Yes, sir.
I need you to be very clear and very honest, son. What exactly did it look like?
I described the one back at camp wearing my hat.
And you said there's one by your car now.
Yeah, it smells terrible.
What is this one wearing?
Nothing. Just burlap and cloth. This one's face is frowning. Wait. It looks like something is on its chest. It has a piece of paper pinned to it.
Anything else?
Yeah, something is written on the paper.
Son, I need you to listen to me very clearly.
Okay.
I have some bad news. I'm in my truck now, and I was headed your way. The bridge leading into your trail is partially collapsed and impassable. We're not sure how it happened, but we have emergency crews working on it now. I need you to start moving this instant. Right now, you are at the north side of the mountain, and I need you to go down to the south face. That's where we'll meet. Do you have a compass and map?
Yes, sir.
Good. Alright, here's the exact point to meet. That's the exact point where I will meet you. Do not stay where you are. Get away from your car. Most importantly, do not hang around any of those scarecrows. Do you understand me? If you see any more, I want you to run as fast as you can away from it. Clear?
I will. Trust me.
I need you to keep moving.
What's going on? Am I in danger? What does the scarecrow have to do with anything?
Listen, just keep moving while the sun is up, and make as little noise as possible. Are you wearing bright clothing?
No, I'm not. I have a dark brown coat and gray pants.
Good. Try and stay out of plain sight as much as possible. Move quickly, and call me if you see or hear anything unnatural.
Unnatural?
You'll know, but only make phone calls if absolutely necessary. When night falls, stay warm and hidden. No fires. If you hear anything in the night, do not run. Stay as still and quiet as possible.
Wait, will you tell me what I should be looking for?
Get moving south, now.
Wait, Then he just hung up.
Where are you now?
Moving south. There's creepy stuff going on.
What do you mean?
I walked by the spot where my campsite was last night. The scarecrow. The one that was wearing my hat. It wasn't there.
Just gone?
Yes. Nothing at all.
Dude, I'm so sorry you're going through this. My eyes are watering just reading your texts.
I hate this, man. I just want to be home.
You gotta do what the ranger said, and we'll get you out of there. Do you have data on your work phone?
No. Just talk and text.
Great. Plenty of battery?
Yes, thank God.
3:03 p.m.
I'm exhausted and scared as hell. Still making my way to the other trail on the south side to meet the ranger.
Keep moving. 3:44 p.m.
I see the scarecrow. The one from my camp, it's up in a tree. Way up in a tree. Dude, how did it get so high up there?
What the hell? Send me a pic.
I can't get a good shot. It's so high up and this camera sucks. It's just hanging there. It looks like it's staring at me. I'm so freaked out and tired. Something is dripping off of it.
Get away from it, Dylan. 4:17 p.m.
The sun's about to set. I'm gonna find a place to sleep.
Dylan, you never told me what was on that note. The one that was pinned to the scarecrow. By the car. 4:32 p.m.
Oh yeah, you're right. It said, "Are you scared yet?"
Who the hell do you think is doing this? Dylan? 7:01 p.m. Dylan? Are you okay? Text me back when you can. I don't want to waste your battery. 2:02 a.m.
It's getting closer.
What's getting closer? 2:04 a.m.
Jeez, it's right next to me. Oh god, I need help. What is this thing? Oh my god. Is this thing even human? It can't be. It stopped. I'm behind a tree. I don't know if it knows where I am. Oh my god, that smell. It smells so bad. I'm gonna make a run for it. It's too close.
2:05. Oh hell, please tell me you're okay. What is it? Dylan? 2:19 a.m. Dylan, I'm gonna call the police. Oh hell, dude, what happened? 2:49 a.m. I called the police. They were looking for you at the South Face, where the ranger said he would meet you. Please, please tell me you made it. 2:57 a.m. Dylan? 3:33 a.m.
Hello.
Dylan, are you okay? What happened? 3:41 a.m.
Hello.
Dylan?
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Huh? 4:13 a.m.
Are you scared yet?
4:14 a.m. What the hell? Where the hell are you? Are you okay? Dylan? That's the last I heard from him. I'm working with the authorities now and they're trying to track Dylan's phone. Update. I just heard back from the police. All they found was another scarecrow. It was sitting on the driver's seat of Dylan's car. It was wearing a dark brown coat and gray pants. The scarecrow was filled with meat. They're not sure what kind. The police are having me fly out to Denver now. As soon as I landed in Denver, I powered up my cell. I had a series of texts from Dylan's phone. I'm not sure what time they were sent. 7:45 a.m.
Come find me.
Who the F is this? Where is Dylan? I'm with the police. We will find you. There was no response. After I got my luggage, I rented a small truck and drove to the ranger station. The police officer I spoke with told me they were letting the ranger handle the investigation for now. As soon as I arrived, I was escorted to the back room. I assumed it was the same ranger that had talked to Dylan. He was a lanky, disheveled man with shaggy black hair and pale white skin. He reeked of smoke and looked like he hadn't slept in years. I sat down across from him. He placed his hat on the table, lit a cigarette, and spoke.
We called you down here because at first we needed your phone as part of the investigation, but I'm afraid that's no longer necessary.
What happened?
I'm sorry, but I cannot discuss any details at the moment. You need to leave this to the professionals. We will do everything we can to find your friend.
That's BS.
I'm so sorry, but we cannot have civilians interfering. We need you to stay safe and out of the way.
I got text messages from his phone right after I landed. Something happened to him.
I know this is hard. We are searching all possibilities, but we do not believe there was any foul play. Teenagers in the area have been known to play pranks on lone campers. You are more than welcome to help us with reports. I know how hard it is to lose a friend.
Oh, and these teenagers slash tires and steal phones to send violent threats too? Effing do something. You even told Dylan that he was in danger.
I promise. We are working night and day. I think the best thing to do is stay off the trails and be there for his family and...
I couldn't even let him finish his sentence. I was too upset. I stormed out and he didn't attempt to stop me. I know that was all BS. What was he trying to keep from me? I had text evidence that Dylan was being followed by someone, or something. I'm going to figure this out. I went to the only place I was familiar with in the area, Dylan's apartment. I still remembered his door code from the last time I had visited. The apartment was eerily quiet. I was overcome with feelings of fear and sadness. As soon as I saw a picture of Dylan in the kitchen, I couldn't help it. I had to cry. After a few moments, I collected myself, opened the fridge, and pulled out a beer. I needed to sit and think. As I got up to throw away the empty beer bottle, I saw something in Dylan's kitchen, his Colorado map. I had forgotten all about it. Dylan used this large topographical map to keep track of all the places he tracked. The map was riddled with black thumbtacks and a few white ones. Dylan's method was simple: black thumbtacks for the areas he had already explored, and white for his upcoming adventures. I wrote the coordinates on the white markers. I searched through Dylan's apartment and collected the remaining camping gear. I grabbed a wooden baseball bat from his closet as well. I knew where to go. I loaded the truck, tossing the supplies in the truck bed, and headed to the mountain. It was a long drive. Eventually, I passed the old bridge on the way. I didn't notice any sign of recent construction. 10 minutes later, I pulled up next to Dylan's car. It was eerie to see yellow tape wrapped around the body of his white sedan. It made the situation all too real. As soon as I parked the pickup, I dropped a pin on my phone. After what seemed like an eternity of hiking, I reached the point of the map where Dylan had marked, and I got to work setting up camp. I was running out of daylight. I constructed my tent and placed a sleeping bag inside. As soon as night fell, I lit a large fire and quietly snuck away from camp. I took cover in the trees about 100 yards away. I posted up beneath a large tree, cracked open an energy drink, and kept my eyes glued on the tent. 11:13 p.m. Nothing. I thought I heard a few footsteps rustling in the leaves, but I chalked it up to wildlife. 12:02 a.m. It was quieter. Still nothing. 1:10 a.m. Oh hell! I yelled as I jumped. I almost had a heart attack. 3 deer walked by me. I had started to nod off, and they woke me up. 2:23 a.m. I was exhausted, cold, and trying to stay awake. I drank my last bit of caffeine. 3:11 a.m. I saw something, walking towards the tent. It was a man. With a flashlight, he started looking in and around my tent. What the F? 3:13 a.m. He noticed no one was in the tent and started shining the flashlight around the woods. He didn't see me. 3:19 a.m. He started leaving and headed south. I followed. I took off my boots so I could walk quietly, threw on a couple more pairs of wool socks, and kept my distance. 4:01 a.m. I continued to follow, taking countless turns in the dark. He seemed to be wandering, shining the flashlight in front of him as he walked. 4:17 a.m. He finally stopped near a pile of leaves. He tripped on something and started brushing away the leaves. Then I saw his face. It was the park ranger. There were doors under the pile, huge metal cellar doors. A chain was fastened around the handles and the doors led straight into the ground. He stopped to smoke a cigarette, pulled a notepad from his coat pocket, and scribbled something down. After he finished writing, he started looking through a flip phone. There was no way. I sent a text. 4:19 a.m. Where is Dylan? 4:20 a.m. This jerk had Dylan's phone. It chimed right after I sent the text. He freaking read it and whispered to himself, "I told you to leave it to the professionals," and put the phone back in his pocket. I wanted to kill him. I was blinded by rage. He started undoing the chains and making a lot of noise. I couldn't let him disappear from my sight. I was running out of time. 4:28 a.m. I did it. I hit the jerk in the skull with the bat, right before he opened the doors. I swung as hard as I could. He fell to the ground and didn't move. The chain rested next to his bleeding temple. He never heard me coming. I'll never forget the sound when the bat connected. That dull thud and crack of solid wood smashing into bone. Sweat and blood misted in the air as he fell. I opened the cellar doors and I wished I hadn't. It was the smell. A putrid stench of rotting flesh that hit me first. As soon as I saw the first limb sticking out of the massive mound of corpses, I had to look away. My head was spinning and my stomach turned over. I ran. I was mortified by what I had just seen. 6:48 a.m. I got back to Dylan's apartment. I was still sweating and breathing heavily as I bought a plane ticket for the next flight home. I decided the best plan was to call the police when I landed. I just wanted to go home. My heart was pounding. 8:58 a.m. Red and blue lights flashed outside as a police car pulled up to Dylan's door. I had to try and keep my cool. I spoke with the officer. I felt like I was going to vomit. As we were talking about Dylan's disappearance, the officer's receiver sounded. I listened in horror. Some campers discovered a scarecrow strung high in a tree with a noose around its neck. The campers claimed dark liquid was seeping from its burlap skin, and it was wearing a park ranger's hat. My thoughts began to race. I made a huge mistake. The ranger was just investigating a lead which led him to the cellar. He must have found Dylan's phone after I got those weird texts. But how did he get a key to the cellar? I acted so quickly. I hit him with the bat and ran. Oh hell, what have I done? I just left him to die. And most importantly, that cellar. What the hell was that? My phone chimed. I had a text from an unknown number. 10:10 a.m.
Why did you run?
Number 13.
I grew up all my life glued to a computer. When I first started talking, I was already browsing through my uncle's computer, switching between games. By the time I was 10, I was taking over my family's MSN accounts and making them send each other awkward messages. I was 10 at the time, so the messages were stuff like, "I hate you," or "Give me back my Power Ranger." As you can imagine, I had no friends growing up. I was bullied and pushed around a lot. I'm autistic, so I guess that was the reason. I don't know, nor will I ever. My old man kept telling me I had to stand up for myself, that I had to show them I wasn't afraid. Truth is, I couldn't fight back. I tried, but my punches were weak and my kicks would tickle. I spent the best part of 6 years thinking the only way I could fight back was by physically fighting them. Little did I know that the world I grew up in, the virtual world, was about to become a second life for everyone. From here on, my mistakes started to pile up. I was 16. Everyone was using Facebook, Twitter, what was popular. People flocked to it. I had a main bully, as you could say, Brock. Brock was the definition of a bully. I guess it made what I did to him easier to live with. You see, Brock loved to brag. His girlfriend was hot, his figure was fit, and he was amazing at sports. His only downside was he was completely dumb, and he hated anyone that excelled academically. Surprise, surprise, I was the smart one. I guess that was the upside to my autism. He hated that, and proceeded to make my life a living hell. I tried fighting back again using my weak body, forgetting my strongest weapon was my mind. So one day while I was browsing Facebook, I came across Brock as a suggested friend. He was now in my world, and suddenly, something clicked. I created a burn account, jazzed it up and made it look legit. I added Brock as a friend and proceeded to find out as much as I could about him. I found his girlfriend as well, and I also sent her a friend request. I then sent Brock an email from Facebook claiming his account had been compromised and to download a PDF file with all the security measures updated. What a complete fool. I had access to his laptop and proceeded to find everything there was to know about him. I knew so much that at any point in time, I could tell you where he was, what he was doing, and who he was doing it with. I also had his laptop camera send me images every so often, just so I knew what he was up to. When his girlfriend came over, I was ready. I booted up my online dating application and started sending messages to Brock. Hey baby, can't wait to see you tomorrow. Last week was a blast. I won't go into so much detail, but due to the fact that I knew what he was up to, it was easy to convince his girlfriend that his online babe was real. I didn't stop there. I downloaded on his laptop as much gay porn as I could find. At a time where homosexuality wasn't as accepted as it is today, you could imagine how his parents reacted to his fun drive. He didn't come back to school since then. My guess is he moved out of town. I don't know. I didn't care to look anymore. To me, that was a small victory, and I relished in it. Now, I wish I would have stopped there. Oh God, I wish I stopped there. You see, I was addicted. That feeling of justice being served by my hands was one I loved and wanted more. Due to those desires, I eventually started to target criminals, the type that use the dark web to hide and spread their filth. For 4 straight years, I was a pain in their life. Pedophiles, rapists, heavy drug dealers, you name it. If they were online, I was making their lives a living hell. I thought I was being smart. I thought I was hiding myself pretty well. But man, something was following me every step of the way, and it would soon tell me. I woke up one morning as any normal day. I booted up my desktop and browsed Reddit. The usual was on. Guys complaining that something was overpowered, something was underpowered, the game designers weren't listening, and the usual morning chuckle. That's when I heard a ping. The Facebook Messenger notification sound. Funny. I didn't open Facebook yet. Maybe I did and I forgot. It was odd, but not enough to sound any major alarms. A message from someone I don't know, and it read, "Hey Danny, what's the weather like in Japan?" What the hell? Weather in Japan? I'm on the other side of the world. The name read James Puckerson. On my other monitor, I started to go through his profile, trying to find any mutual friends. You know, someone I met in a party or something. I then responded with, "Sunny, I hope. Anyone who knows me knows I hate rain." I kept looking, but nothing of interest pops up. James then replies, "Oh, a funny guy. Tell me, Danny, do you enjoy playing games?" At this point, I think he's referring to video games. Yeah, dude. What do you have in mind? League of Legends? Dota? I don't mind. Oh, Danny, I didn't mean one of those childish games. I mean a real game. You know, the type that involves putting one's life on the line. I let out a chuckle. Someone probably hacked my Facebook account and is now trolling me. This isn't a joke, Danny. I take these games extremely seriously. Okay, what? How did he know I laughed? Did he guess? There's no way he can see me. My camera isn't even plugged in, and how could he have gotten into my apartment? My Facebook profile had a fake address on it, and I never used my real address for anything, not even Amazon or eBay. This has to be a joke. I then wrote, "Sure, dude, I'm bored anyways." I was buying time to try to find out where this creep was. I scoured everywhere trying to find any small clue to latch onto. That's when I found something, kept going, and looked into it more, eventually leading up to an address. When I looked at the address, I completely froze. It was my address. I was the only one living there, but somehow this creep was using my address as a cover. Another message. "I see you've gone extremely pale, Danny. What's the matter? Don't believe in ghosts?" I couldn't move. This guy could see me. He knew every move I was making, and I didn't know what to do. Do I run away and burn everything down? Fry my hard drives and shred my motherboard? What is going on here? Ring ring, Danny. Ring ring. My phone starts to ring, but it isn't James. The caller ID read, "Mum." I immediately picked up the phone. I did, however, hesitate to speak. I can't show my mom I'm afraid of something. She'd worry way too much, so I try to act cool. Hey Mom, is everything alright? What I heard next made me drop my phone in horror. It made me realize that this was real, and this wasn't a joke. A voice, obviously modulated to hide the identity of the caller, but the threat was real, and I knew who it was.
Hey Danny, what's the weather like in Japan?
I stood frozen in horror. Panic swept over my body, and thoughts flooded my mind. What happened to my mother? Is she okay? What is this creep doing with her phone? I knew I had to calm down. Something didn't seem right. I picked up the phone and looked at the caller ID. It just said Mum, no number. How could I be so stupid? He was just masking his caller ID. Must be to throw me off balance. I'll play along. There must be something I'm missing. What are you doing with my mom's phone? Where is she? Is she okay? A laugh came from the other end. A deep, disgusting laugh. I decided to record the call. Maybe I can play around with the recording and find this caller's real voice. It may not be much, but this creep knows where I live, and probably who my parents are. That's when he starts talking.
Oh, Danny. The safety of your mother depends on the outcome of our little game. I told you one life is on the line, but I should have elaborated and said it shouldn't necessarily be the player's life. So, are you ready to play?
At this point I had a thought. How can James see me? I have no cameras connected to the Wi-Fi. My desktop camera is disconnected, and I ripped out my laptop camera when I got the damn thing. Another option would be he broke into my apartment and installed cameras when I was out. But why would he risk getting caught like that? I may have cameras at home and catch him doing it. No, he must be using one of my devices. It doesn't seem like I have a choice, James. So let's play. We've all watched those horror movies. These games weren't exactly a Mario Kart sort of level. Suddenly I knew I wanted to throw myself from my apartment for how stupid I'd been. In my hand, I held the single device that had a camera and was connected to my Wi-Fi. My phone. I didn't want to jump to the conclusion that that was the only camera that was being used, so I decided to test it. Before I do anything though, he then begins to speak.
Well, Danny, I must say, you've got some balls. Most guys would have started to cry or beg me to stop. This will most certainly be fun.
I've had enough of this bullcrap. I started Googling stuff like how to track a phone call and how to find cameras in a house. I wanted to see if he could see my screen. The confirmation came through.
Oh, Danny, it's cute you're still trying to fight back, but I can assure you, you will not be able to track this call, and you will not find out how I can see you.
Oh, really? Challenge accepted then. I angle my phone away from my bag and take out a USB dongle. If this creep is on my Wi-Fi, I'm gonna make him think he's controlling all of my devices. I look for my laptop while trying to make as little noise as possible, and again, angling my phone away from what I'm doing. I find my laptop, boot it up, and plug my dongle into it. Yeah, well, I'm a tough one to crack. So when are we playing, James? And do go over the rules properly, yeah? I would love to beat you by playing by your own rules. My strategy was to show no fear. In truth, I was terrified, but I knew the instant he smelled fear, he would have total control over me, and I'd screw up and forget basic stuff like I had when this show first started. I knew this creep was using my network somehow, so I decided to hack my own network and see how he got in. Maybe he left something behind.
The rules are simple, Danny. You wanted to play judge, jury, and executioner. So in turn, we're gonna have to go through your history of White Knight justice and see just how much of a hero you really are.
Hero? Huh? There was a time when I thought I was a hero. Maybe it was when I made that child molester end his own life. I told myself I was a hero because he wouldn't hurt another child. In truth, was I a murderer? Was this my past coming to haunt me? No time to think about this. It isn't just my life on the line here. Everyone I care about is in danger, and there's no time to be selfish. Hero? That's cute, James, but I've always known I was the devil, a necessary evil. But sure, let's take a walk down memory lane. Maybe that will remind you who you're dealing with here. My attempts were bringing up nothing. I managed to break into my own network many times, but I couldn't find a trace of another device. Not a trace of information transfer. Wait, information transfer? Outgoing and incoming traffic. Oh, I'm so stupid. He can see a stream of my screen, which means I have outgoing traffic somewhere, right? I start watching my outgoing traffic, encrypted of course, but there was still an address. A server that this information was going through. I find the address of the server and decide to do something extremely stupid and might sentence myself to prison, or worse, no access to a computer. But I decide that this is a small price to pay for the safety of my family.
Well, Danny. Watch your screen as the image pops up. Let's roll the tape, ladies and gentlemen.
What a complete psycho. I don't pay attention to the tone of his voice as I set up my botnet for a distributed denial of service attack. My hope is that if I bring down the server for a bit, I'll be able to see where the requests are coming from and track it from there. It is a long shot, but it might work. As I'm doing this, I also stop recording the call and send the recording over to my laptop. All the while, I'm angling my phone away from my laptop, and since he hasn't spoken of it, my theory that the only camera being my phone turned out to be correct. I finally feel like I'm making the right moves in this twisted game of chess. I'm just hoping I'll be the one to say checkmate at the end of it though.
Victim number 1, Brock, 16 years old. You destroyed his relationship and got him kicked out of his home. He spent 3 years on the streets before overdosing on heroin. That wasn't a nice thing to do, Danny.
A picture of 16-year-old Brock pops up. He died? Oh, I mean, he was a bully, but he didn't deserve to die. I went too far, but I couldn't admit it, not to this psycho. I had to show him that I had no heart. Well, life sucks. Survival of the fittest. Maybe he should have been careful with whom he messed with. Another disgusting laugh. James is enjoying himself. Should I be? No time for that right now. I put the phone on speaker and placed it on my desk, weary that the front camera may be used, so I kept it well out of sight and put my earphone into my left ear. Time to tweak around with this recording and unmodulate this voice.
Oh, Danny, this isn't gonna end well for you if you show no remorse. Now the fun begins. Remember his girlfriend? It's confession time, Danny.
As if it were alive, my PC opened up Skype and auto-signed in. Oh, I'm so stupid. Was I really that lazy? A number is entered into it, and it starts dialing.
Ring, ring.
What do you want me to do, James? Tell her that the online babe was me, and Brock wasn't a cheating dickhead? What's that going to change? My botnet was ready, and I started my attack on the server address instantly. I then watched my incoming and outgoing traffic closely. All I needed was a hiccup, something that will lead me to James. In that moment, it was like the entire world grinded to a halt. In that moment, it wouldn't matter to me if the moon was crashing down onto Earth to end all life as we knew it. All that mattered was this stream of information. I could hear the second hand of my watch ticking. There, a clue. Phew, I was starting to lose hope. I start working on it. Did James notice? I'd imagine his connection to my network might have dropped since I saw a request ping, but nothing going back. Was he too busy trying to guilt trip me that he got cocky and didn't notice? My Skype was still ringing. Was she going to pick up?
Hello?
A girl's voice. She sounds kinda cute actually. Is James hooking us up? Okay. Wrong time for jokes here. James speaks to me.
Go on, Danny. Answer her. Tell her your name and what you did to Brock.
I decided to play along. It's true he didn't call me from my mom's number, but that doesn't mean he still can't hurt her. Liz? It's Daniel Kurt. We went to school together with Brock. There was a pause. I can't imagine how awkward this must be for her. I didn't have the time to care though. I ran a search on the address, and while that was going on, I continued tweaking with the recording.
Danny? That loony kid that used to get beaten up all the time?
Ah, what a cow. I had to fight back the urge to show and educate her on what autism is. Whatever though, it's not my concern. At least breaking this news to her won't be as painful to me as I thought. Yeah, that's me, the loony kid. Anyways, so listen, I don't suppose you remember Brock Leland? You kinda slept with him at that time. Maybe not the best choice of words.
Yeah, I remember him. I heard he died from a drug overdose. Makes me feel horrible breaking up with him.
Another pause.
Why?
How do I say this? This is a confession. If she takes this to the police, I'm screwed. I wonder if there's any chance I have getting away with this. I was 16 though. Does it even matter? I read somewhere that crimes committed before 18 aren't dealt with anymore. I mean, I was just a kid. To hell with this. I need to stop this madness before he makes me call a victim of an attack I committed after 18.
Yeah, well, it's my fault he did this. He made my life horrible when I was in school, so I decided to fight back. He never cheated on you. I just made it look like he was.
A really long pause. Gives me time to work on this recording. Nothing remotely human yet. I'm still searching for that address. Why is it taking forever?
Danny.
Her voice was extremely soft. I was expecting something else. An angrier tone would have made more sense.
Yeah?
I know.
She knows. What does she mean? Is she connected to James? Or was this going against James' plan? Is she James?
What? How do you know?
Another pause. What the hell is going on here? How the hell does she know? My search comes up with something. James is definitely in the same country, but I had to narrow it down. Why is it taking way too long? I hear her taking a deep breath.
I always knew Brock was faithful. It's why I stuck around. I wanted to leave him because he was a hard person. Not to me, but to other people. I mean, look at you, Danny. Sure, you were bullied by everyone, but Brock kept taking it too far. And it wasn't just you. Other people would be pushed around by him every day, and I was sick of it.
Another pause. Is she crying? I can definitely hear her cry. I didn't want to cut in at all. I let her take her time.
I guess I was looking for a way out, and seeing this girl that Brock supposedly cheated on me with was my ticket. I knew he was faithful, and I had to take this chance and end the relationship there. I didn't know his life would be ruined because of it. I mean, for crying out loud, we were just kids.
Her voice had gotten louder now. I could tell she was beating herself up about this. I had to comfort her in some way.
Liz, it wasn't your fault. He made the wrong choices in life and ultimately couldn't live up to them. You were trapped in that relationship. You were under no obligation to continue with him. It wasn't your fault. I did this, and I will gladly take the blame. I gotta still ask though, how'd you know it was me?
She laughs. I guess that was a stupid question. I knew the answer before she said it.
I'm not stupid, Danny. I knew Brock isn't the type of person to get in trouble with an anonymous or stuff like that. I knew that Brock made someone mad who was good with computers, and the only person I could think of was you.
All right.
I laughed. I didn't care if James was listening. I didn't care if he would blast through the door and shoot me in the head. I laughed at how stupid I really was, and how I thought I was being so clever, and that's when a thought quickly wormed itself into my mind. James was not going to be happy with this outcome.
Liz, are you with someone right now?
My thoughts are to get her somewhere safe, somewhere James can't get to her without causing too much attention.
No, I'm out.
That's when the line suddenly cut.
Liz.
I pick up my phone.
What have you done to her, you twisted creep?
Silence. Not a single noise. I looked at my phone puzzled. We were still connected. Where did he go? This ain't the time for a toilet break. Then I heard a sound. He's there, and he starts to speak, and he isn't happy.
Homo sapiens, an intriguing species. They never do things the way you expect them to.
I hear a sigh.
She will be dealt with soon. For now, though, let's continue our trip down memory lane.
Oh my god, he's going to kill her. I needed to hurry up and find something. Anything. I can't let anyone else die because of me. I can't. Another picture shows up. The child molester that I scared and ended up taking his own life. What sort of justice was James looking for here, if any at all? I start to panic. Why is he making me do all of this? Surely he knows I did these attacks. He has the evidence. Why not just turn it over to the police? That's all the more reason to find this creep.
Jordan Fisher, age 36. You masqueraded as all the children he molested and caused him to take his own life. Now, you might think this is an act of heroism, but if so, why haven't you told anyone about your heroic act, Danny?
He was mocking me. His continued talk of heroism disgusted me. I needed to find Liz. I needed to alert the police and let them know she's in danger.
And what do you suppose you're doing now, James? Are you a hero to these people? Are you acting out their revenge? Wake up, you creep. These people are criminals. All I did was rid the world of them.
I looked over to my search window. It was narrowing it down. I was finally getting somewhere. Back to tweaking the voice recording. I felt like I was getting close to finding out what James' real voice was like, but it wasn't male. It was definitely female. Well, anything that will tell me anything about James will help. One thing is certain. People feel safe as long as they're under the illusion that they are secure. Once you break that illusion, once you burst out of that bubble, they start to panic. And one thing you can be certain of, people that panic screw up everything. It's human nature, I guess. That's when James responds.
Justice? I'm not doing this for justice, Danny. I'm playing a game with you. It doesn't seem like you understand what the game is yet. I feel sorry for you. Anyway, let's continue. Fisher had a daughter. Did you know that? She was 15 when her dad took his own life. Tell me, Danny, don't you think she should know why her dad died? I mean, it's only fair, right? Time to confess. Oh, I almost forgot. Her name is Sarah. You'll need that when you talk to her.
As before, another number was dialed from my Skype and began to ring. She was 15? I was still 16 at the time. How could a child molester have kids? I deprived one of her dad, but he was a monster. What have I done?
Hello? Who's there? Help me!
A girl, her voice aching with distress. I could hear an echo. Where is she? And why does she sound like she's in trouble? James suddenly starts to speak again.
Oh, Danny. You better answer her. Who knows what might happen to her?
Another one of his laughs echoed through my phone speakers, and it absolutely disturbed me. I guess I had no choice.
Sarah? Are you okay? What's going on?
I thought it'd be best to check if she was alright before confessing to my crime.
I don't know. I think I'm okay. I can't feel my legs.
Her breath rate starts to increase.
Who are you? Where am I? Help me, please.
What is going on here? Did James kidnap her? I needed to calm her down. What kind of twisted game was this?
Just calm down, Sarah. Take deep breaths. Can you look around and tell me what you see?
I turned to my phone. James was silent. I wasn't having it. It was time for some answers.
Okay, James. What the hell is going on? What have you done to Liz and Sarah?
James was quick to respond this time.
10 minutes, Danny. You have 10 minutes. Find them.
I was just as quick to react. Screw trying to find James right now. There are innocent lives on the line here. I need to find them. I needed to trace Sarah's phone, and I had an idea how. Sarah responds before I could do anything though.
It's so dark in here. I see a camera on a stand in front of me. I'm in a chair, but I can't get up. I can't feel my legs. It's so dark in here. Oh my God, what is going on?
Ah, damn it. He's probably using a burner phone. No good to me right now. Tracing it will take ages. Hang on. Sarah is 19. She has to have a smartphone with her.
Sarah, listen to me very carefully. I need you to feel your pockets. Do you have a smartphone? And if so, what is it, and is it on you?
I hear a few groans. Whatever James did to her was painful. My guess was her legs were broken.
Yes, I have my iPhone with me. It's not dead. Shall I call the police?
She then asked, but I could tell from her tone she was happy she still had her phone on her.
If she calls the police, she dies instantly.
James snaps.
If you don't want her to die, you have to find her yourself.
Damn it. I didn't intend to rely on the police anyway, but they would have helped. I need to find a way to explain to her just how dire the situation was without making her panic enough to call the police. I didn't think James would be happy with me telling her the conditions of our little game, but my brain worked quick.
Sarah, no need to call the police. I'm a detective. I've been looking for you as you've been missing for a while. Now you need to tell me what your iCloud username and password is. I'll track you using your Find My iPhone.
I try to keep my voice calm. I didn't want to induce panic. She gives me her details, and I log into iCloud and look for her phone. Within a matter of seconds, it shows me the location of the phone. Huh, not that far from where I live. It was only a 5-minute walk.
Look, I got her location, James. Now let her go.
Another laugh. How the hell can someone enjoy this?
Oh, Danny. I didn't ask you to give her location. I asked you to find her. Run, Danny, but take your phone with you. We still have a lot to chat about.
It dawned on me why she was so close, and why he gave me such a long time frame for an easy task. I had to physically find her, so I dropped everything and ran. Before I left the apartment, I grabbed a small kitchen knife and wrapped it with a towel. I might need it, though I doubt it will do anything if a real threat shows itself. I run to the address as fast as I possibly could. At the time, I rarely exercised, and when I reached the address, I felt like dying. I saw a large building in front of me, at least 7 stories high. There were no bells to ring, so I banged on the door as hard as I could. No reply. I didn't have time to waste. I tried to find a weak spot in the door. It was old, so that wasn't too hard. Remember how I said I didn't exercise? Well, try busting down a door when you struggle to open a jar of honey. I looked around for something to use. There were a couple of bricks lying around. I instantly grabbed one, and I threw it at the door, hoping there isn't anyone on the other side. The brick just bounced off. I then picked it up and started hitting the hinges of the door. After a few swings, it finally let loose. One hinge down, no time to celebrate. I keep hammering at the door until it finally breaks loose. Sarah, are you here? Can you hear me? I run inside, and I look around hastily. There must have been 20 or so rooms in the building. I didn't have the time to look through each one.
Help! I'm here! Help me, please!
That's Sarah. I run to where I hear her voice. Sarah, I'm here. Keep talking to me. I'm coming.
Detective, I'm over here. Be careful! There's someone else here.
I stop outside the door where the sound is coming from. Is James here? Would he risk exposing his identity like this? I'm running out of time, so I take out the small knife and kick open the door. I step into the room, knife raised, steadying my breath. I look around the room. It's dark and I wait for my eyes to adjust. I start to make out a chair with someone seated in it, a stand with what I assumed was the camera from Sarah's description, and a figure standing opposite to me, a female figure. I couldn't quite see her face yet. My eyes were taking forever to adjust. I turned to face this figure while glancing at Sarah. "Sarah, are you okay?" I asked sternly. I need to make sure she's fine before whatever's about to go down.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel my legs again, but I still can't move. There's another girl here, red hair, but she's passed out.
She sounds relieved. I guess she thinks I'm a fit detective with dashing hair and stunning eyes. Oh, I do not envy her for the disappointment she's in for. The red-haired girl was probably Liz. So this is the grand battle then. At least it's almost over. Just as I'm about to address the figure, who I could only assume was James, I hear a familiar voice coming from her.
"Hey, Danny."
I freeze. That voice. It can't be. No, it's impossible. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense, but it also terrified me. Who was the one person I kept no secrets with? Who was the one person that knew everything I had ever done? Who was the one person that had access to my address, PC, apartment, phone, everything I owned? Who was the one person I shared my heart with? My one true love. "Angela?" I whispered softly. The thought that my girlfriend, my heart and soul had done this, completely crushed me. I felt tears rolling down my face. Of course, it all made sense. This supreme hacker never did any hacking at all. She had installed cameras in my apartment because she was always there. She knew I didn't have any of my own. She had her address spoofed as my own because, well, she knew what it was. She added James to my Facebook account because she had my login details for Facebook. I shared everything with her, and the thought of her doing this never crossed my mind. Why? Why are you doing this? What are you doing? I don't understand. What did I ever do to you? I'm speaking through tears, and I can barely string together a sentence. My eyes start to adjust and I see her. Angela. Is she crying as well? Or am I hallucinating? No, those are definitely tears. Is she really James? Or did James threaten her to do this?
Ta-da!
She sings through tears.
Are you proud of me yet, Danny? Did you enjoy our little game?
At this point, I'm angry, confused, and tired. Why? I screamed. The tears don't stop. Instead, they increase with intensity. Why are you doing this? Why are you hurting innocent people? Why are you hurting me? I've only ever loved you and cared for you. Why? She laughs. Her laugh is fake, I can tell, but she still laughs.
Why?
She says in a mocking tone.
Don't you know why, Danny? Don't you know why your lovely girlfriend is doing this? Danny, did you not find it odd that I didn't introduce you to my parents? Ever?
I did find that odd. She was always reluctant on telling me who her parents were. But I didn't mind. I loved her for her, not for her parents. I'm searching for answers. Then it hits me. Her dad must have been a victim of one of my many attacks, and I confessed it all to her. But still, if he was a victim to an attack from me, he must have been a criminal. Why is she doing this?
Oh, it seems like you understand. My dad was David Jessington. You know, the drug dealer you put behind bars. I loved you, Danny. I still do. But when my dad was arrested, he made me swear to make whoever did this to him pay. I tried, and I looked for whoever did. But after a year, I gave up. Then, I met you and fell in love. I thought we could live our lives forever together. Then you had to tell me that you wanted there to be no secrets between us. You had to tell me everything you've ever done, including getting my dad arrested.
She takes a breath and wipes away her tears, then continues.
I spent weeks fighting with myself internally. I tried to forget that I was in love with the man responsible for me not being able to see my father. I tried, but I couldn't. Eventually, I went and visited my dad. I asked him if I still had to make the one who did this to him pay, even if it was someone I loved deeply. I pleaded with him to forgive me, but he looked at me and told me that if I had the power to avenge him and didn't, he'd disown me as a daughter and never forgive me.
Her tears had returned, and she started to stutter as she spoke.
Danny, I love you. I always will, but I swore to my dad. And if he ever finds out I let you go, he'd kill me. At least, if I make it look like I made you pay, he'll let you go. I don't care if I'm arrested. I don't care if you hate me forever. I love you, Danny, and that's why I'm doing this.
My heart ached. I felt her pain. I felt her struggle. I wanted more than anything to just hug her and tell her it'll all be okay. I dropped my knife and started walking towards her. I didn't care if she killed me. I didn't care if the whole world was against me. I loved her, and I wanted to fight for her. With every step I took towards her, my heart began to flutter. It was like I was falling in love with her again. But she kept crying and raised her knife toward me.
Danny, stop. Please stop. I don't want to do this. I can't let you get close to me again. Please, Danny, stop.
She realized I didn't care if I died. That's when she raised the knife to her neck. I stopped and stared at her eyes, her beautiful, hurting eyes.
Please, Danny. I don't want to hurt you anymore. I can't do this anymore. Please stop.
I run to her as she's about to drive the knife into her neck. I hold the blade with my bare hand. Blood starts dripping from the fresh wounds, but I don't care. I stare into her eyes and softly whisper, I love you, Angela. I always have and I always will. I don't care who your dad is. I don't care if the whole world is on his side. I will fight for you. I will die for you. Stop this madness. Let's face this world together. She continues to cry and drops the knife as I lean in to kiss her. I hear sirens in the background. Someone must have seen me breaking into the building and alerted the police, but I didn't care. I was in my own world, with the other half of my heart. What happened next was a blur. First it was the police, then it was the ambulance. Angela and I were arrested, but thanks to the witness reports by Liz and Sarah, I was released immediately. I attended Angela's hearing, and she looked happy to see me there. Her sentence wasn't too long, less than her father's, but I didn't care. I promised I'd fight with her until the end, and I meant every word. I keep visiting her every time I get the chance, each visit with a new gift, each visit with more stories to tell each other. She'll be out in one day, and I will always be there for her. Once she comes out, we will move away. I'm working hard, taking every shift I can, earning every penny I can. I won't ever hack again. I won't ever take justice into my own hands, because even though I have helped someone, I have also hurt another, and maybe they deserve it. Maybe what I did was right, but I am not justice. I have no right to claim to be. I have made some mistakes in the past, and maybe James was my justice. For now though, I know what I must do, and I have my heart set on the path I have chosen. Maybe I made the wrong decision. Maybe I should have let her die and continued my vigilante run. Maybe there's no place far enough for us to run where her father can't find us. But I don't care. My fight isn't over. It has only just begun.
Number 12.
The ocean has its silent caves, deep, deep quiet and alone. Though there be fury on the waves, beneath them there is none. Over the course of the last few weeks of training, I'd memorised nearly every facet of the Tuscany, every dial and every readout and every knob and screen and nuance of structure. And the quality of the personal submarine's craftsmanship never ceased to astound me. It was a remarkable feat of engineering, this little beast designed with such care that even the equipment on the hull could withstand more water pressure than the sea could muster up at any achievable depth. It was my Pegasus, my Trojan horse, my very own Apollo 11, and inside this matrix of layered syntactic foam I would follow the ballasts to the gratuitous and unexplored depths of Higgins Moor. I began the separation sequence and the deep diver fell away from the escort and dipped beneath the surface of the Pacific. With silence and grace and a few knots of speed, and then I was consumed in a whole new world, albeit one I'd frequented, that of the sea. Schools of fish swam on by me, and when their cloud passed through a sunbeam it glinted silver, and beneath them swam rays that rolled their wings to the beat of the current, and out in the rocks crawled the crustaceans. But I had an appointment to keep, and the oxygen tank was a demanding clock. So I dove right on past the old reef and out into the open waters where the seabed couldn't be seen for many, many miles yet. The moor, Rubin had said, 50,000 feet below the surface, Booker. 50,000, do you know what that means? Means it's a whole hell of a lot deeper down than the Challenger abyss. He nodded at that. Are you ready to make history? Was I? I thought I was. I'd prepared for this lonely dive and nothing else for some years now. It was the culmination of a lifetime of work and study in the field, and so tight was its grip on my mind that I often dreamt of it in my sleep, of what I'd find at the bottom and what would it mean, and what monstrous things might take offence to my presence there. No, I shoved that thought aside. Tuscany was all the protection I needed in that regard. It offered technology on the bleeding edge in lieu of a heavy hull, and that was enough to withstand enough water pressure to crush bones beneath skin and inches of steel. What animal had jaws more powerful than the ocean itself at fathom? So I hit the thrusters and down I went, like a bullet to the pitch. I eyed the depth meter as much as I did the sea. 100 feet, 200. Sharks and turtles and uncountable fish swept past me. 300 feet, 500 feet, 700, 1,000, 1,250. The inverse height of the Empire State Building, 1,516. The water began to blur and grain up and darken as the sunlight struggled to push on through. 2,025, 3,032. Where the light no longer shines. And soon all the light I had to spill were the lights of the Tuscany. I continued the descent for hours. The pressure meter ticked up in spasmic bursts, but up it went, up, soon ticking past the point where the weight of the sea would have crushed the steel of another vessel. 1 mile down, 1.6, where even sperm whales hit their lowest dive. I could now claim with confidence that no mammal on Earth was as deep down at that very moment as myself, and I still dove 2 miles. 2.1, 2.2. The water was as black as space now, except for where the lights of the Tuscany pierced through it, and the thickness of the fluid against the reinforced windows and slimed its way across the hull. Things were tight down, despite the vastness of it all, yet still I dove. 13,000 feet. The abyssal zone. Pressure stands at 11,000 psi. I saw an angler float by and it was startled by the sheer volume of light spread by the Tuscany that dwarfed its own bioluminescent glow. It swam away and I dove further. 15,000 feet, 3 miles, 3.1. Now things get interesting. Mankind has visited these depths almost infrequently enough to count the expeditions on a single pair of hands. I was now ranked among the illustrious few explorers, and although I wasn't the first to hit these marks, I'd hit the deepest one yet before this journey was over. I was determined and I was capable, so I checked the depth chart. 16,281.4 feet, nearly halfway to the world record. The Tuscany continued its dive, 20,000 feet down. The Hadal zone pressure here is 1,100 times what it is at the surface, 22,000 feet, 29,000. The height of Mount Everest, 30.5, 31, the same distance from the surface as a commercial airliner at the peak of its flight. The Challenger Deep, what had previously been the lowest recorded place on the seabed, sat at roughly 36,000 feet below the surface, and to the best accounts life existed there but only sparsely, and the pressure is unspeakable. But I was going somewhere vastly deeper even than that. All we know is we found a canyon, Reuben had said. Dwarfs the Grand, sitting dead centre in the Pacific seabed, about 1,200 kilometres west of Hawaii, and another 900 south, and near as we can figure some 50,000 feet straight on down. And now I'm at 36,000 feet. I was now tied for the world record. No human being in recorded history had been as deep below the surface as I was at that very moment. 37, 37.3, 37.9, 38, 38.5. The awful spirits of the deep hold their communion there, and there are those for whom we weep, the young, the bright, the fair. According to the best information available to me at the time of departure, Higgins Moor is a pit, roughly a full kilometre across. It begins at approximately 46,000 feet below the surface and is estimated to bottom out at Higgins Deep, which is a small valley that sits at its base. Some 5,000 additional feet below that, the moor is the largest and deepest such formation in the hydrosphere, and yet its dimensions and locations are the only things known about it. 43,000 feet down, I hit the floodlights underneath the Tuscany, and the glow washed over an alien landscape that likely hadn't seen light in over 1 billion years. There were mountains here, mountains, ones that rivaled the Alps, wild arches and plateaus that stretched far off to a murky horizon before being shrouded by seawater. I even saw life down in the depths. A squid-like thing of simply monstrous size swam on by my boat. It stopped for a moment. During the moment I thought it might take offence to me, but after looking hard at the Tuscany and brushing a tentacle down the port side, it swam off in search of other things. I descended further, 44,000 feet, 45, and then all of a sudden there it was, the moor. I'm hung by the jaw as the sheer scope of the beast came into view. It was a breathtaking sight to behold. Monstrously large and equally dark hole, crust of the earth that plummeted to inconceivable fathoms. I descended a bit further, 46,000 feet, and Tuscany fell into its yawn. Somehow things were even blacker in the depths of the thing, even though sunlight had long since been blotted out. 46.5, 47, 47.2. I began to become was unexpected and it was therefore alarming, and yet I couldn't bear to pull myself back up. Not yet. I'll turn around if it gets bad. So down I went, deeper and deeper and deeper still into the cavern. 48,000 feet, 48, 5, 49, 49. And then I saw it, a glow. I squinted and dimmed my lights to confirm intuition. What in the name of God? It was there indeed, a dim reddish purple, then green, then purple again, and then blue, floating on a mist of current some few thousand feet now. I resumed the dive to chase it. 49, 5, 49, 7. The glow was getting deeper, wider and brighter. Soon filled up the whole path down. I dimmed the Tuscany's underlights, low its setting, and by 50,000 feet I could see that the glow was coming from somewhere, not directly beneath me, but off to the left and around a wide corner. This cave isn't a straight pit, and sure enough, hole bottomed out and then opened up to its left. Oh God. It was a cavern chamber at least a full kilometre up and deep and side to side and across, and only the enormity of its radius maintained the darkness of it despite the presence of thousands of floating bioluminescent pods that pulsed purple and green and blue and red and dimmed in the interim. I took the Tuscany in deeper and her cameras came to life. Calmly the wearied seamen rest beneath their own blue sea. The ocean solitudes are blessed, for there is purity. The cavern became darker still when the pods faded into the water behind the ship, but there were more things to be seen. Rocks. After about 15 minutes entering the chamber, Tuscany floated by a bizarrely rope-like plant of impossible size, one that appeared to stretch nearly across the height of the cave and grew wider at the base. Although the bottom of it was shrouded in blackness, I took the submarine in for a closer inspection and hit the lights to the fullest setting. My heartbeat slammed. There were suction cups on it, each one as big as the Tuscany herself, and they moved and pulsed across and down the full length of what was now very clearly a tentacle. In a panic, I shoved Tuscany back and away from the thing, but when I tried to turn her around, the base of the hull collided with the beast and stuck fast to one of the cups. I gunned the thrusters and could hear a wet, tearing sound as the machine ripped itself free of the cup's grasp. But then the tentacle came to life. It whipped and whirled and smacked around the cavern and pressed itself to the roof, and then it fell down deep beyond where the darkness blanketed the floor. Come on, baby, I hit the thrusters again, and Tuscany rocketed off the way it came, through the darkness and off towards the pods, whose glow I hoped would afford me an opportunity to shut the lights off the ship and make my escape. Oh, if I was so lucky. Very soon I began to hear and feel the movement of something unspeakably titanic rolling across the floor of the chamber. It rumbled and thundered and shuddered and shook, and soon clouds of dirt and rock flew up out of the black pitch and blacked out my view forward, and I could hear boulders smack against the ceiling of the cave before sinking again to where they'd been. Oh my God, the sound had erupted across the entire breadth of the cave at once. My eardrums nearly burst, and likely would have had it not been for muffling of the explosion provided by the walls of the Tuscany. The submarine shook too, but she held up her integrity well enough for me to fly on past the floating pods, some of which were now knocked about on their sides and rolling, and back towards the yawning mouth of the tunnel that would take me back out into the open. The Tuscany buckled and rolled with an impact. The tentacle, I realised, had shot up from the ground and hit the bottom of the ship between her ballasts, but luckily it knocked her, forcing her up towards the tunnel. I rolled Tuscany with the hit and managed to regain some control when I boosted the thrusters into the turn and up again, now back into the moor. Then I began to climb. 52,000 feet, 51.5, 51. Come on, baby, come on. Don't you fail me now. Don't you fail me now. 50.5, 50.99, 49.6. Tuscany ascended with panicked speed, and all the while she did it, I could feel the rumbling of the tentacle's pursuit in the walls of the pit. It smashed its way on through the tunnel and whipped and thrashed, but Tuscany was too quick a runner. 47.5, 47, 46.8, 46.4, 46,000 feet and climbing high. Tuscany burst out of the moor and was about to rocket straight on back up to the surface when the tentacle flew out beside her, nearly smashed in her front window. I bent the controls to the edge of their set casing and Tuscany tanked to the left and up a bit and missed the ground by inches. As I struggled to remount the climb, I hit the lights again to navigate the labyrinth of rocks. But in the light of the ship I saw it. These weren't rocks after all. They were other ships. Massive vessels, Imperial warships from ages past, bent and crooked and broken at the bottom of the sea, pulled down here by whatever it was that now threw its back into my devouring. The tentacles smashed along behind me, main masts and battlements and flat decks and rusted iron and wooden boat hulls were splintered up and tossed into the winds of the sea, never again to reconvene. I took Tuscany through this nautical graveyard with far, far too much speed for my safety. Under ship towers we went and through cannon mounts and past the blades of dead engines and around upended rudders. The cacophony of my flight and the destructive path set by my hunter awoke the life in the place. Fish washed out of holes and cabins and captain's quarters and deep deck stair flights and soon joined me in my effort to escape. But it seemed there was no escape to be found here. The entire ground for countless miles shook and rumbled with seismic force. It was thunderously loud, and it picked up speed and violence with time. Tuscany finally flew up to miss a splintered crow's nest atop of the mast by less than a foot, and finally used that directed momentum to put away distance between the seabed and herself with as many knots of speed as her thrusters would allow without bursting from the effort. The depth chart began to rise. 45.9, 45.2, 45,000 feet, 44.8. Come on. The water itself seemed to shift with the sound, and then, out of nowhere, Tuscany was no longer the only thing spilling light into the abyss. An orange glow flashed across the sea and for an instant illuminated nearly the entirety of its vastness, and it blinked and then flicked on again and stayed active. I shut off Tuscany's lights to preserve every molecule of power for the ascent. 44.2, 44, 47.3. Beside me in the glow I could make out other creatures retreating too. Ones of spectacular size, again, that mankind had never catalogued and that I, sadly, would not have the time to study. There were city bus-sized manta ray-shaped things wrapped up in clouded wisps of transparent jelly, and even squid the size of a building, all flying upwards in a mass panic. I led the charge. 43.1, 42.8, 42.3, 42. I looked behind me and down through the rear window. The moor had moved. It was alive. God almighty. I was in the Leviathan's throat. I was in its throat. I saw its tentacled tongue lash out of the moor and collect enough fish to feed a small town. Tuscany rocketed ever upwards as the Leviathan whipped even larger tentacles behind it and gained speed with the force of a hurricane. The Leviathan opened its maw yet again and spewed forth its tentacled tongue, and with it, it whipped up several Olympic swimming pools worth of water into gale-force turbulence. A mammoth squid was caught up in its fury. I saw it and then it vanished into the pit forever when the maw snapped shut with a thunderous echoing snap. Tuscany, meanwhile, continued to rocket upwards and managed to escape the whirlpool by a foot. 39.5, 39, 38.7, 38.2, 38,000 feet and climbing. But the Leviathan pursued me relentlessly, riding on the flood of its own current, its tentacles each dozens of feet across and a mile long. 37.5, 37, 36.4. Tuscany had proved her worth with speed, and the pressure now fell in jumps. It remained in the red and wood for some time, but it was falling steadily, even as the depth chart rose. 29,000 feet, 28.3, 27.5. But the Leviathan hadn't given up the chase, not yet. I could feel it doubling its efforts. The displaced water rocked the Tuscany, and she buckled and rolled in the synthetic current. And then I heard the moor open up behind me, and the water began to whip and swirl itself into a frenzy by the ocean load. I punched the thrusters to breaking point. Come on. The encasing, syntactic foam was pressed to its limits. The reinforced glass began to chip every so very slightly, but the chips broke into cracks, and those cracks began to crawl across the width of the windows. I checked the gauges, 20,000 feet, 19.8, 19.4, 19.3. The ascent was slowing. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Please, God, be with me now. In the orange glow of the Leviathan's eyes, I could see how quickly the water was slipping by Tuscany and getting swept up into the chaos. The submarine began to sway port to starboard and shudder and shake. 17,000, 16,9, 16,3, 16,1, 16,000. I watched the gauge with a nauseating desperation. 59.5, 59.2. Oh, I could feel her slowing to a crawl. Come on, come on, come on. 59.25, 59.4, 59.6. And that was it. Tuscany was caught. And no sooner did the depth chart begin to slip, then did I feel the whole submarine lose all sense of control and tumble backwards and around. I was thrown out of my seat and smacked my nose against the roof of the pilot sphere. Blood exploded, and it drenched my shirt and sprayed the glass and the entirety of the control set. I grabbed my face and began to apply pressure to slow the blood loss, but Tuscany again flipped ballast over ballast to starboard in the whirlpool and spilled me into the hatch ladder. I felt my shoulder dislocate and my kneecap smack into the bottom rung. My head swam and still Tuscany tumbled backwards. The cracks on the windows spread faster. 16.3, 16.4. I could smell the inside of the moor through the hull of the ship, but then all at once and not a moment too soon, I got an idea. It wasn't a good one, but hell, it was better than nothing. I managed to limp and tumble my way to the controls and grip the handles as the ship rolled. Wait for it, wait for it, wait. Now, the sound of the roar was so close, every last control surface in the sphere rattled in its case. My eardrums rattled too, but then I flared up the thrusters again, full blast and at an angle, and the Tuscany shuddered and flipped and shook and with fortune fell straight out of the vortex with inches to spare. I felt the edge of the Leviathan's maw graze the starboard side, and the impact again sent me into the roof while the ship rolled end over, end over, end again. I smacked my ribs on a dip and fell back down into the seat head first and then out onto the floor. I managed to right myself with my good arm and get my bearings. I was free, but only just. The Tuscany banked and tumbled again and rolled slower now in the absence of the whirlpool's flood current, but not yet in control of its pull. I tried to steer away, but it was useless. The ship flipped around the back of the Leviathan's titanic maw and up over its head as the beast flew on by underneath me like a freight train. And for the first time since catching the monster's eye, I began to fully appreciate the magnitude of its size. Its back was an endless, snake-like and sharp-finned spine, the size of a minor mountain range, and only quick manoeuvring moved Tuscany away from the jagged back fins that chugged upwards towards me and sliced open the sea itself. They missed me by feet, and the blast of the current they swept up sent the submarine reeling backwards, off a bit further and into relative safety. I quickly dimmed the lights to their lowest setting and caught my breath. As the full form of the Leviathan washed on past me, it stretched far away into the abyss below for well over a mile, and dragging away behind it were thousands upon thousands of tentacles, a forest of the things, each the size of a 6-lane highway and tipped with razor-sharp hooks and a flurry of wing fins. took a full 3 minutes for the beast to pass me by fully, and then it curved around in the other direction and swam off in search of other things to devour. The form soon slipped away into a shadow, and then it was gone. I surfaced hours later, having allowing the battered Tuscany to take its time with the journey. She was solely responsible for my escape, a marvel of engineering indeed. Once I did break the surface, I dispersed a distress beacon and then promptly collapsed with exhaustion. Evidently, I was picked up by the Coast Guard some hours after that, a few hundred miles southwest of Hawaii, and pulled from the near wreckage of my submarine and taken to a hospital on the mainland. It was there that I woke up a full day later. As I recovered, I heard some isolated chatter of tremendous seismic activity near where I'd been, and how the whole ocean floor had changed and moved and shifted form, but I couldn't care less. I told the bastards what I knew. And on top of that, they have the Tuscany and they have all the recorded evidence. And you, listening now, have the narrated account. What everyone does with this information now is entirely up to them. All I know is that I won't be doing any more diving anytime soon. I've come to a realisation that mankind has more than enough space to expand throughout and live upon and thrive in above and near the surface, and on land and in the skies, and soon hopefully out there amongst the stars. But there are things in the sea that hold ownership of the deep, and perhaps it's best to leave it that way, for all our sakes. The earth has guilt, the earth has care, unquiet are its graves, peaceful sleep is ever there, beneath the dark blue waves. The USS District of Columbia deployed its cargo, a two-man Eisenhower-class Navy stealth sub called Agincourt, on which I served as navigator alongside Engineer Lovell, and once it was loose it slipped away in the Pacific and began to part with its escort. The sea was in a shambles here. There were dead fish and splintered boat hulls floating in the current, but it was far from unexpected. It was recently estimated, in fact, that since the Leviathan awoke some months ago, it has critically disrupted over 400 trillion cubic tons of water and all the life therein, and was becoming a potential threat to shipping lanes as well as naval operations. It had been classified for these reasons and others as a severe national security threat, and so the Navy built the Agincourt on Tuscany's blueprint and selected Lovell and myself to man it, and then instructed the pair of us to hunt down the Leviathan and lure it up from the deep so District of Columbia could move in with a swift kill without exposing herself in the chase. For some hours after we entered the sea, there was little else but quiet there. And the hulking mass of the District of Columbia as it followed, but even that faded into the seawater. And when it did, Lovell and I found ourselves alone in the midst of the ocean. He descended the hatch ladder from the operations centre and joined me for a moment in the sphere. So Latner, you're the nav. How do you plan on finding this thing in the middle of the ocean? Then I told him I'm already tracking it. You see that? I pointed up at a corridor of seawater that was moving north and that carried on for miles. We'd been following it for some time, and then he said, "Didn't realise there was a draft that big out here." "There wasn't," I said, "until earlier this morning. That Leviathan swam on down this way a few hours ago, and it left this as a little present for the two of us." "Well then, we'll be sure to thank it. How much longer before we see the damn thing?" "Not long. Look at those fish." I nodded toward a school of the things. "You ever see anything like that? They're swimming towards us for a reason. Closer we get, more we'll see. Just wait." And we did. What started as an isolated school of fish soon became several, and then the nautical retreat boiled over in scale and number into a mammoth, seething cloud of life, all whirled up into a frenzy and pushing desperately south against the riptide. Like birds from a storm cloud or the onset of winter, the two of us said not a word until the crowd broke, and Agincourt again found itself floating in the open and quiet sea. And then I brought the Agincourt to a full stop, and Lovell said, "Holy God." Ahead of us and not more than 2 miles off was a titanic mass of shadow. unmoving and so breathtakingly huge that not even all of its edges could be fully seen. It was the Leviathan. Blue whales and dinosaurs themselves paled in comparison to this monstrous mountainous thing, and as Lovell and I sat and stared at it, it made its first move. A turn away into the depths behind it, followed by a sharp dive. In doing so, of course, the silhouette of its full form came into view, and the sight of it stole the breath right from our lungs. We couldn't have said a word at that moment, even if we'd known the words to say. We simply stared out at the thing and did our unworthy best to appreciate the magnitude of its vastness. It was as long as they said it was, an enormous slithering serpent thing whose tail broke into 1,000 other tails that drifted and curled and dragged lazily behind it and fell deep away into the blackness. But seeing it in person was altogether a new experience. Before saying another word to me, Lovell hopped back to the ladder and climbed up to the operations room, and then I heard him say, "Agincourt to District of Columbia, this is Lieutenant Lovell. We've located the Leviathan, 33.934 by negative 153.4570. We're giving chase, but it's moving fast and it's moving down. Look to the riptide. Advise that District follow our mark and stand by to engage until we've brought it back up to you." I gunned the thrusters as he spoke and followed the slipping shadow away into the deep. 12 knots of speed, 12.2, 12.4. Agincourt crawled and then cruised and then ran with all haste in pursuit of a monster. Lovell came down the hatch ladder a few minutes later. He said, "District is en route. Are we making speed, going fast enough?" I told him. I said, "She's moving, but she's not coming out into the open till we've got this monster where she wants it. Any ideas on that front?" I said to him, "You seen the footage from Tuscany?" "Bits and pieces, yeah." Well, the pilot caught the Leviathan's attention and it chased him straight up to the surface, and he only made it by the skin of his teeth. From what I hear, he gave up deep diving altogether. The point is, Agincourt's faster than Tuscany. If we get that thing to chase us, we can outrun it, and then get District on its flanks. Couple of torpedoes to a side, and boom, we'll have ourselves a 300,000-ton museum piece. And then there was a pause, and Lovell asked the worst question of all. "And what if District can't put a dent in that thing? You saw how big it is." "Well, then I suppose we need to find another ride home." The Agincourt filled up her ballasts and followed the Leviathan down to the depths of the Pacific, past where the water stopped the sunbeams at the gate, and before long all that could be seen was nothing at all. From that point forward, it was the boat's humble capacity for sonar that kept us moving in the right direction, with an occasional nudge from the monster's own flood current. Lovell broke a long silence. "What's the plan?" "At the moment, I'm just trying to get the damn thing's attention. The closer we are to District when it notices us, the better. But as it stands, we're getting in too deep, way too deep. And we were, by the depth chart, we just passed 15,000 feet and we needed to get things turned around." I told him to strap himself in, and he did, in the passenger chair behind mine. And then I hit the front lights and gunned the thrusters. "What the hell are you doing?" "Like I said, I'm getting its attention." But then I stopped and eased back on the thrusters. The lights of the Agincourt spilled their glow to the whole of the abyss, and they found it empty. Where the hell did it go? I dialed up the brightness of the lights and brought the boat to a full stop. We scanned the water for hints of movement or shadow, but there was no movement and there was nothing but shadow and silence. I moved Agincourt from a rest to a light cruising speed, and her searchlights swept and swooped and cast themselves to the rocks. Nothing. Damn. Useless. I hit the lights off. Lovell said, "Now what? What is it? There's no way in hell something that big just disappeared, so where did it go?" I blew the ballasts and adjusted Agincourt's heading for the surface, and then I gunned the thrusters harder than ever. And then I said, "It didn't go anywhere. It knew we were there all along. It just dragged us down into the dark to shake our tail." Lovell spoke again. "What? A thing that size is afraid of being hunted?" "It's not being hunted. We are." Agincourt lifted herself up through the water with as much speed as she could muster up for the running. But time was against us. Up ahead we saw the shadow of a Titan moving fast to block off our escape. It was the difference in shade between deep twilight and midnight black. We've got to move, I said. See if you can't raise the district. Lovell unbuckled his seatbelt and flew to the hatch ladder and climbed it 2 rungs at a time. Clang, 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 and not a moment later I heard the static of the radio as he lifted a hail. Hello, hello, District of Columbia. This is Agincourt. Can you read me? Over. Static, audible, even in the pilot sphere. The sheer bulk of the Leviathan was blocking the signal. I told him to keep trying to raise the escort. I'm going to get out from under this thing and clear the way. Hello, hello, District of Columbia. This is Lieutenant Lovell of the Agincourt. Can you read me? Over. Agincourt banked hard over to her starboard flank and I allotted her all speed for the escape. 17 knots flat, 17.3, 17.5, 17.7. I looked up. The Leviathan's shadow bathed the whole of the seabed in its mass. Still, we ran. Hello, hello, District of Columbia. This is the USS Agincourt. Can you hear me? Over. 19 knots, 19.2, 19.4. Agincourt was moving faster than most vessels already, and yet the shadow above us had not struggled at all to keep us within perimeter. So big was its source. 21 knots. District of Columbia, this is Agincourt. Can you read me? Over. Respond. Still nothing. 21.9, 22.2. I looked up again. The shadow was murky and ill-defined, but I could make out the monstrous alien forest of its mighty tentacles, which wrapped and curled and spread out in all directions in the absence of movement. It looked like a black star seen through a bent lens of time, but it was slipping back behind us. Agincourt was more than a match for speed. Hello, District of Columbia. This is Lieutenant Lovell of the Agincourt. Can you read? Still, I heard static, but there were bursts of clearer sound too, just barely over the threshold of audibility. We were getting into the clear and quickly. 25 knots, 25.3, almost too quickly. Hello, District of Columbia. This is Agincourt. Do you read? Over. Can you hear me? I looked up and back over my shoulder. 25.8, 25.9, 26 knots. Oh no, the Leviathan wasn't pursuing us after all. It was moving back up. I fired up all of Agincourt's lights and thrusters and blew her ballasts. We began to climb. Lovell, any luck on the radio? None yet, why? Leviathan's not moving after us, it's going up. Good, District will hit it when it gets close then. It's not going to get close, it's going to come up right underneath the boat. Sub won't be able to use its armament at that range. There was a pause. 23 knots now. We lost speed when we moved up. 23.1. Lovell started to freak out. Oh my god, move, 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 god damn it, move, get us up there. 25.4 knots, 25.7. The massive shadow of the Leviathan was moving up into the brighter waters and I could see its tentacles falling into line as it gained speed. Hello, hello, District of Columbia, this is Agincourt. Can you read me? Over. Respond, respond. 27.3 knots, 3,000 feet below the surface, 2,000 roughly to District's test depth. Agincourt continued her climb and gradually as she did the waters began to brighten. The pressure gauge began to fall and the Leviathan, now swimming fast far above and to the left of us, came closer into view. Only then did I understand fully District of Columbia stood no chance even in an unfair fight. This beast was unstoppable. Hello, hello, District of Columbia, this is Agincourt. Can you read me? Over. Hello, hello, District of Columbia, this is Agincourt. Can you read me? Over. 1,500 feet to the escort's test depth.
Hello, Agincourt. Is District Columbia here? Reading. Over. We're moving.
Then Lovell responded. Listen to me, Ensign. We're telling you we do not have the Leviathan in tow. I repeat, we do not have the Leviathan in tow. It got between us and is heading for the coordinates I listed earlier. If you're there, you need to fall back immediately. Do you copy? Leave now. 1,000 feet, 800, 750.
You're breaking up. The coordinates listed C3.4 by negative 150.45. Ding by package weight.
District of Columbia, do you copy? This is Lieutenant Lovell of the USS Agincourt. Are you there? Do you read me? My heartbeat kicked up into my throat. I knew that sound, the roar of the Leviathan from the Tuscany tapes. Clearly the beast had exhausted its usefulness for stealth, and that could only mean a single thing. Damn it. Lovell joined me in the pilot's sphere. Jesus, what the hell was that? He said. I couldn't lie to him. We're too late. That's what it is, we're too late. And we were. Although Agincourt's current of speed swept us in closer before I pulled it to a full stop, it was a stop with a view. A helpless and terrible view. We saw the mountainous back of the Leviathan and its great maw covered with a shield wall of its withering tentacles, absorbing a series of torpedo charges from the escort sub. It discharged a flurry of Mark 48s from the pods. Those torpedoes left on rockets and detonated in waves. And for a fleeting moment I thought it might be enough, if properly targeted, to turn back the Leviathan or wound the damn thing or something. But the beast took the hits and only crawled forward, and before long the sub had only its ballistic arsenal, nothing appropriate for a fight like this. It began to throw its whole effort to a retreat, but an Ohio class is a hulking mammoth. 2 football fields in length and nearly 19,000 long tons of metal and rivets. The District of Columbia was doomed. District is dust. The final torpedo in the Columbia's armament cache was launched. It sped through the water and trailed a skipping, sputtering wake, and hit a tentacle and exploded tremendously but fruitlessly upon it. And then after a moment of silence, the Leviathan unravelled itself and its tentacles blocked out the last of the sunbeams at dusk. And they swirled and curled and wrapped their vastness around the hulk of the district. Vessel is gone. God damn it. I pulled the Agincourt away from the feasting with all speed. 20 knots, 20.1, 20.4. Hello, USS Dixon, do you read? This is Lieutenant Lovell of the Agincourt. Respond, over. Hello, Dixon, this is the USS Agincourt, over, requesting a pickup, do you read, over? Hello, Dixon, this is the Agincourt, do you copy, over? I felt a rumbling and a shaking and a mighty displacement in the water behind us. Agincourt buckled and rolled. I looked behind me. Oh God, the Leviathan had finished its meal and was turning around. God almighty, there it was. The maw, it was big. Hideously, monstrously, impossibly big. A yawning canyon and a mouth all the same. What the hell is this thing?
Hello, Agincourt. This is the USS Dixon responding to request for pickup. What's your heading?
The Leviathan opened its eyes and Agincourt was suddenly awash with an orange glow. And then I said, Lovell, cancel pickup. Tell Dixon to get itself to safety. We'll try to shake this thing and rendezvous. The Leviathan's tentacles flew into form behind it as it gave chase. Help us, please, please, Jesus. Lovell continued. Dixon, do you copy, over?
Loud and clear, Agincourt.
Listen to me, we are currently heading northwest with all speed. The USS District of Columbia has been destroyed. We are...
I'm sorry, say again, over. The Columbia is gone?
Affirmative, the Leviathan has destroyed the USS District of Columbia. We are now... I gunned Agincourt's thrusters for all they were worth. They groaned and protested, but they did their job, if only just. 30 knots now, 30.2, 30.3. Even if the ocean itself seemed to be draining into the thing's mouth by the lake load. Come on, baby, come on, come on, come on.
Agincourt, this is the Dixon, actual. Confirmed destruction of District of Columbia, over.
Yes, sir, the Leviathan took everything District had to throw at it, sir, and then it just ate the ship.
We've located your beacon, Agincourt. The destroyer group is moving into rescue and engage.
When we reached 33 knots, my heart stopped. Lovell continued.
Dixon, are you there? Captain Gilsey, do not engage, sir. Do not. I promise you, sir, there is nothing short of a nuke that can stop this thing. Get that destroyer group to safety and we will meet you there. Negative, Agincourt. You've brought the thing into the open. We'll handle it from here. Gilsey out.
Agincourt flew admirably, but from the sound and from its own effort, it rumbled and it shook and it swam against the might of the current. Went out 34-7, 35. Come on, baby. Come on, baby.
Dixon, this is Agincourt requesting you disengage immediately. Respond, goddammit.
The Leviathan was gaining. Whether or not that meant it was moving swift or simply dragging the sea itself to its yawn was unclear and irrelevant. All I knew and all I cared to reverse was the fact that the Agincourt was failing. Despite a mighty effort to put distance between herself and her hunter, it was a race against time and all the odds. And it was a race we were losing. 36 knots, 36-1.
Dixon, this is Agincourt. Answer me, you crazy psychopaths. Disengage.
Every dial and needle and stick and lever rattled in their sets, and my eardrums shook, and upstairs I could hear Lovell screaming in rage and pounding the side of the control desk with a wrench. 37 knots, 37-3. The closer the Leviathan got, the more speed we needed just to keep ourselves alive. It was like being caught by pull of gravity on the edge of an event horizon. I began to see the shadow of the moor creep over the ship. Agincourt was nearly at capacity now, 39 knots, and it wasn't enough. The water rushed into the moor and Agincourt went with it, tumbling helplessly and desperately, and with its thrusters flaring with all their strength. The force of the explosion from an anti-submarine ship-to-ship missile undoubtedly expanded through the sea and seemed to set the whole ocean ablaze. The Dixon had arrived. Another explosion went off and it shook our ship to the core, and the Leviathan rerouted its course for the surface with demonic speed. Behind us, by not more than a few hundred feet, we felt its mass as it moved. Undersea waves were unleashed, that enveloped and consumed the Agincourt again and sent her tumbling ballast to ballast and left her nearly belly up in the water before she rolled around again. The explosions were getting closer. I said, Lovell, do they know we're down here? I don't know, they might have lost our beacon with the radio signal, which means they think we're dead. There was a mighty flash of light and then the force of the latest depth bomb washed through the sea and through the Agincourt's battered hull and into her cabin. It sent me reeling despite my restraints. My ears rang and reported back nothing but that ringing, and the ship buckled and tumbled and groaned and shuddered and shook, and the lights flickered and the alarm blared and the panels flashed red. I unbuckled myself from the toppled chair and rose to my feet shakily and stumbled over to the controls. The explosions were no further off than before the last one, but my ears struggled now to report them properly. Everything was muffled, everything swam, my head, my vision. I kept fumbling over the controls, dials and readouts, and panels were in their off state. I tried boosting the thrusters and heard only the click-click-clicking sound of the control in its set. I could hear my own heart more than the battle. And gradually the shock began to fade, and when it did, it gave way to something worse. Fear. I was worried about Lovell. I ran from the control set to the hatch ladder and looked up. A droplet of water hit me in the eye, then another, and I started to climb. As my hand hit the top rung of the ladder, it slipped on fluid, but I grabbed it tighter and pulled myself up into the operations centre below the hatch. Lovell? Of course there was no response. Lovell was sitting at an unnatural angle against the far wall and his eyes were still and shut, and a bit of blood pooled from his right ear and down onto his shoulders, where it was washed away by a steady trickle of seawater from the bent hatch that became a stream that became several. The lights flickered again. I reached my friend and knelt down next to him in the water. Lovell, hey buddy, hey, can you hear me? I heard not but the slightest, quietest whimper, and it was drowned out by the other sounds quickly, the roar of the beast. Then one far more ominous even than that. I heard rushing water from down below, and when I looked over the edge, I saw the ocean. Inside the pilot sphere, and it was rising up to meet me, but I could only see it from a sunbeam that struck through the hatch. I grabbed a wrench. Lovell, we're at the surface, mate. I can see the sun. It's right there, buddy. That's home. Just sit tight, okay? I climbed up 2 more rungs on the ladder and swung at the hatch with the wrench. It bent up, ever so slightly. I swung again. An inch of progress. Lovell whimpered. Hang in there, buddy, okay? I swung again. The lights shut off for a final time. Agincourt tumbled and groaned as she died. Come on, please, Jesus, please, God. The hatch began to bend a bit more. The sunlight brightened, and the water from below now had reached the midpoint of Lovell's upturned service boots. Then after another bash with the wrench, I felt a release. Got it. I had forced a hole in the hatch big enough to put a hand through, but then the water dumped inside at twice the rate of the surge from below. I turned my head and slid down the ladder and stumbled back as it began to pull up. Then I looked up through the hole, and only once did I realise the mistake. We weren't at the surface. We were merely close to it. Not more than 100 feet away, but many, many feet too far.
Number 15. Stranger encounter. When you're an urban explorer planning to explore an abandoned building, be prepared to find it occupied. All Around Lifestyle published this video in December of 2015. Mike wrote, "Me and a mate went exploring in a grain elevator, which is located in Poland in a city called Warklaw. The footage was captured on a GoPro Silver 3 edition. After exploring the cellar and several other floors, they explore the grounds. There are several other small buildings in the area, and as they approach one of them, they hear voices.
You can hear there's someone in there.
This building is as dilapidated as the rest of them, rubble on the ground, but in the far room the guys distinctly hear several voices. Mike enters the small building, and when the people in question appear in the far doorway, he asks in Polish if he can record there. One man says yes, but another says no and tells him to leave now. Mike explains afterwards that he believes the people in the abandoned buildings were living there. Don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to run into anyone in this remote place." Number 14. The Rattler. When Soda Paps bikes down Bulldog Trail in South Dakota's Black Hills, with his GoPro mounted, he probably wasn't expecting it to almost cost him his life. This video, published in May of 2012, shows the rocky dirt trail beneath his tires, sometimes surrounded by tunnels, other times trailing beneath old wood bridges. Just as the bicyclist meanders over a little bridge between a gate, the Rattler attacks. He's easy to miss as he blends in with the sand, but Soda Paps aims his GoPro down to get a good shot of the slithering serpent. He notes in the comments, "Yes, I was wearing the helmet and leaned in real close to get this shot." The snake did bite me, but luckily I had a friend who sucked out the venom. Even though that was quite the scary situation for some GoPro footage, he doesn't regret it. He says it's one of the coolest bits of film he's caught on camera. You can't deny him that. Number 13. Train surfing. Going train surfing through a forest in Denmark is nearly as insane as you'd imagined it to be. Just watch this footage published by OJ Adventures in June of 2016, which shows what it's like to jump a train and ride it like a surfboard. The whole thing was captured on the GoPro Hero 4 Black Edition. OJ Adventures writes, "We jumped on the train in a small town up north and drove down to our hometown. Unfortunately, the train driver spotted us at the end of the ride, but thankfully we were just a couple hundred meters from the station. The crew notes that the train driver had suddenly exited the locomotive. Clearly, he'd noticed their antics, and the four became alarmed at the encounter, so they spring down from the flatbed and run along the tracks. Well, certainly a daring stunt. Things could have gone much worse, and they're lucky no one was hurt. Number 12, Troop Encounter. We've all played Call of Duty, but what's it really like to be on the front line? This first-person footage will give you an idea. The Famous World published this footage in January of 2018. The video, which is 25 minutes long, is filmed from the perspective of the driver of the US Humvee. You can see more vehicles in front and someone outside guiding the driver to position the Humvee as a blockade. The driver tells his commander that the opposing forces are taking fire, which you can hear in the background.
You're looking south, right? Look where Gonzo's firing. Kilo 05 to Struck 5. Can you give us a distance and direction over?
The driver then hops outside and fires in the direction of the opposing forces. Following some back and forth, the driver arms himself and crosses the desert in open view to cover his brothers in arms, one of whom is hurt on the ground. They load the man into one of the Humvees, and then there's a good amount of running back and forth between the barricade and the Humvee. At some point, they load up to head off. It's unclear whether the opposing forces stood down, but what is clear is the scary standoff was handled textbook by these men. Number 11.
Far. Water flooded the operations room from both ends and washed me up against the wall next to Lovell. The ocean threw itself to our beating, and it pounded us in waves and torrents and buckets. I couldn't breathe for seconds at a time, but I grabbed Lovell's hand and he squeezed with all the strength he had, just enough to bend his fingertips around the side of my palm, and then we began to float up to the ceiling. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm really, really sorry. I tried. I heard no more explosions from the battle, not
Number 1. Okay, so a little backstory before I tell you one of the crazy experiences of mine that happened during my 2-year security career from 2013 to 2015. I'm a 6'7" male in Australia. I'd like to think I'm a fairly tough and intimidating guy, but some of the shit that used to go on at the mall I used to work the night shift for still gives me goosebumps to this day. So the mall I worked at was very, very large, probably the largest in my state, I'd say, and all the way up to about 8:30 p.m. it would still be quite busy. Only around 9:30 would we manage to usher all of the stragglers out, and only at about 11 p.m. would all the business owners have left. My job was basically to patrol the mall and make sure there was no one sticking around after the doors were closed during the night. We didn't have guns or batons, only a can of mace that was very rarely used. There were multiple occasions where we would find would-be thieves hiding around, trying to break into shops after dark, but they were normally far outnumbered by the 4 to 5 of us on shift at a time, and they would usually be intimidated by me or some of the other imposing members of security. This one night, though, shit started getting really weird for me on the night shift. So, I'd say it was about 2 o'clock, and I was standing in the middle of the empty food court eating a sandwich. This was the only part of the mall that had any light at that time of night due to the skylight, so it was comfortable to eat there. While I was eating, though, I heard a dull scraping noise from the hallway leading off from the food courts and towards some toilets. It sounded like a piece of metal dragging across the floor. I was immediately put on edge, and I flicked on my torch without a moment of hesitation. I can remember creeping down the hallway with the flashlight in hand, illuminating a good 6 or 7 meters in front of me. As I got closer and closer to the end of the hall, the noise became louder and louder, until I reached the end of the hallway, and there was the toilet doors to the left and right of me. I could tell the sound was coming from the female toilets, though. I gripped the handle and opened the door a tiny crack. The noise was now very clear and had me not scared, but confused. I yelled, "Oi, who's in there?" The noise quickly stopped. I paused a moment, listening hard through the tiny crack of the door, and I swear to fucking God I could hear breathing. Low, male breathing. I shut the door, still gripping the handle tightly, and flicked on my radio. This is 1-3. I need help in the food court bathrooms. I think someone's here. No response. This was really strange, and it put me further on edge. Policy was to always answer the radio, and now I was truly becoming quite alarmed. This is 1-3. Does anyone copy? Still no response. I can remember whispering to myself, what the actual fuck? I again opened the door a tiny crack. Listen, mate, I said, sounding as intimidating as I could muster. If you don't fucking come out of here with your hands up, you're going to end up eating your teeth tonight. Do you want that? I sat there at the door, quite honestly terrified at this point. But there was no response. As a matter of fact, there was no noise at all. I yelled into the bathroom. Okay, mate, I'm coming in. If you do anything stupid, it's not my fault you'll never walk again. I tried my hardest to sound scary, but my voice was quivering by this point. This whole situation made no sense at all. Why would someone be in the female bathrooms? What was that metal noise? What the fuck was even happening? I slowly opened the door and scanned my flashlight across the room. All of the cubicles were open, which was weird, but other than that, the room was totally empty, and I was totally shitting myself about now. I walked into the center of the bathroom, closing the door behind me, scared to the core. I let out a faint, "This is some horror movie shit, come out," when I heard the long, whining squeak of the door behind me. I span around, basically crying at this point, and shone my torch on a fucking massive man, at least a head taller than me, or so it seemed in my state at the time. He was Caucasian, and at least in his 40s with matte gray hair all over his forehead. He was mid-opening the door, but he stopped dead still in the middle of his action. He just looked at me, smiling this guilty fucking smile like a kid would make when he gets caught stealing biscuits or some shit like that. I'm not gonna lie. I was so scared I froze. He lifted his finger up to his mouth. Before swinging the door open all the way and sprinting out with what looked like some sort of small metal box in his hand. Turns out, he was just behind the toilet door when I was opening it, and I totally missed him. I was so fucking close to him, and I didn't even notice him. He could have killed me if he had a knife or something, and that thought still haunts me to this day. Later that night, my radio miraculously began working again, and I got right on to telling my coworkers about my story. They collectively went pale when I told them what happened. They all had similar stories, but none that were as much of a close shave as mine. I worked the night shift for another week after that before I quit. I'm not sticking around in a job like that. I needed help, and for some reason my radio fucked itself. Why? So, weird old guy in the toilets, let's not meet again. Number 2. This story happened to me just a little over a year ago, sometime during March of 2015. One thing about me, I'm a guy who lives in the southern end of a neighborhood in Brooklyn called Bensonhurst, not too far from 86th Street. I was simply walking back from getting some basic groceries at night, about 8:30 p.m., in between the HSBC Bank and the Italian Market on 86th Street and 23rd Avenue like it was nothing, since this part of Brooklyn is largely safe. These two shady guys approached me and asked, "Hey, do you know where insert address here is?" My phone died and my buddy here left his phone at home, so I can't look it up. Now, I've had people asking me directions before around here, but this was completely different. I intentionally gave them the wrong directions, leading them towards Bath Beach just down the street. The reason why was because the address they had given me was my building, down to the apartment number. What's worse, is that in the darkness of the night, I could faintly see the handle of what looked like a really huge knife slightly glinting from the light of a nearby street lamp in the waistband of one of the guy's pants. It likely was a machete. To this day, I have no idea who they were. Bensonhurst is a largely safe part of Brooklyn, but it does have a reputation for burglary, and the neighborhood has had its moments of violence. Anybody who's lived here within at least the past 5 years knows how bloody the summer of 2012 really was. Maybe they were looking to rob me in my house, but I don't know. Something about their vibe seemed off and menacing to me, almost reminiscent of the druggies and junkies I'd sometimes see skulking around Avenue S. I may have become largely jaded, but it makes me shudder with fear at the thought of what could have happened if the other guy had his phone on him. Number 3. About 5 months ago, a friend of mine got expelled from his program due to bad marks. He was only halfway through his lease, and he didn't see a point of staying in the city, seeing as he was only here for school. He told me that if I wanted to take over his lease as a subletter, he would only charge me half of the rent, which I thought was a pretty sweet deal. So naturally, although I'm from this town, I thought it was time to leave my parents' place. I had already graduated, and although I had been looking for a new job for a while, I felt like I couldn't miss out on the opportunity. So, I took over his lease and moved into his place. The house itself is actually pretty nice. It's 3 floors, including the basement, and it's located near the university of my town, which is not a very safe area overall, but I spent a lot of my university years here and never felt unsafe. The room in the basement is pretty small but cozy, and the only other room down here is a girl who is currently a student, and she's pretty quiet. Actually, all the girls living here are pretty good roommates. I wasn't thrilled about living with 3 girls, but now I don't see why I would have thought it was an issue. They're all pretty great, and a good time. I'm the only one in the house who isn't a student, and also the only one who's originally from this town. The other roommates are actually all from cities that are only about an hour or 2 away at most, so unless there's something special going on, they all go home on weekends. My friend who got expelled also only lives 2 hours away, so he would always go home for the weekend as well. One thing I forgot to mention, which is pretty crucial to this story, is that the house actually has 5 rooms. But right when they all moved into the new place together, one of the girls had a seizure on her bed and passed away. This was pretty upsetting for everyone, and the landlord told them not to worry about finding anyone else. Their rent never went up or anything, and the room was left vacant. According to the landlord, he just found it insensitive to try and find someone because he didn't want to turn someone's death into a financial inconvenience for them. So after the girl's death, the parents came and took her belongings out of the room, and it just remained empty since then. I actually have never looked in there because it just remained locked, and I don't really have much curiosity to see the room. It's on the 2nd floor, and I never go up there, so I never paid any attention to it. The first weekend I spent there was pretty uneventful. I remember that I spent one night at my boyfriend's place, and then the next night he slept over, and we went out drinking at one of the college bars near the place. We were pretty wasted, so we passed out as soon as we got home. The next weekend I was at home in my new room, and I couldn't sleep, so I decided to read a little bit. I was really enjoying the quietness of this new house since the girls weren't home at all. I come from a Latino family, so this quiet and serene environment was pretty rare. I thought that I heard a few noises upstairs, so I figured that one of the girls had probably decided to stay the weekend at the house, or she was getting last-minute things ready before heading home. I really didn't think much of this. I wasn't very close with the roommates, so I didn't even bother asking them if any of them have stayed home. I just felt like it was none of my business. The girl in the basement was for sure gone for the weekend because she apparently sleeps with her door locked and keeps it open when she's not home. One weekend, the same month, I woke up to pee and I could hear a toilet flushing upstairs, which was kind of weird since I knew that none of the girls were home. I was going to go check it out, but in my tired state, I was too lazy and, frankly, I just didn't care enough. It's funny. Horror movies are supposed to make you paranoid, but the biggest lesson I got from them was that there's always a rational explanation for things. This would prove to be my biggest mistake, because for a couple of months I was always brushing things off and, ironically, creating irrational explanations to rationalize what I thought were irrational thoughts. For example, I heard creaking coming from the second floor and figured one of the girls must have forgotten something and decided to come by to pick it up. The girl must have driven 2 hours down and 2 hours back to her town in the middle of the night to pick something up. One Saturday, I woke up to get some water and noticed that the roommate in the basement was gone. Her door was open and her car wasn't in the driveway. There weren't any cars in the driveway, but I should mention that one of the girls doesn't drive. A couple hours later, I woke up because I heard steps coming down into the basement. At this point, I yelled out the girl's name who doesn't drive because, well, she's the only one who could have been in the house. I didn't get a reply, and instead, just heard the steps going back upstairs. At this point, I started getting uneasy about being home on weekends, so I decided to just spend them at my boyfriend's house. One of the girls made a house Facebook page, which was supposed to address any issues like washing dishes or leaving messes, but it remained pretty inactive since everyone seemed to get along. I posted on there that some creepy stuff was happening on weekends and asked them if they could start just letting me know if they'd be home for the night or not. They seriously thought I was joking around. The replies weren't receptive at all and consisted mainly of LMAO or OMG, you're so funny. Even my boyfriend agreed that I was being paranoid because he too believed that everything has a rational and perfect explanation. The thing is, when you say that everything has an explanation, you're only invalidating paranormal explanations or ghostly activity, which isn't what I was implying at all. I've never believed in ghosts or spirits or any of that jazz, and I never claimed to when I spoke to my roommates or to my boyfriend. They kept on saying that the house was old and made noises. But I know the difference between old house noises and someone walking down the stairs and then walking back up the stairs. Fortunately, my roommates actually did start posting things on the Facebook page to let me know if they'd be gone. It was always to the effect of, "Hey, gay and fired. LOL, I won't be home this weekend, so don't worry about the ghosts." One weekend, they all let me know that they wouldn't be home, and my boyfriend was on the midnight shift, so it looked like I had to spend the night on my own. My boyfriend called me on his break, and while I was on the phone with him, I heard noises on the main floor. I told him I was going to check it out, and he told me to go ahead, because the motherfucker still thought I was being paranoid. As I said this, I heard the footsteps going back up to the second floor. Once I got onto the main floor, there was nobody in the kitchen and all the doors into the house were locked. I was extremely paranoid and didn't feel safe. My boyfriend calmed me down and convinced me that everything was okay. so I never went to the second floor. And it's probably best that I stayed on the main floor. After that weekend, I told my roommates in all seriousness that I was convinced that someone had been in our house at some point that night. I told them what I heard, and the fucking bitches still claimed that it was the old house making noises. My boyfriend was almost permanently on midnights, so I did what I never wanted to do and started spending weekends at my parents' place. The girls still posted on the page whether or not they were leaving the house, and I decided that I should do the same. So I also started posting when I was and was not sleeping at the house. One Friday night, the Facebook page looked something like this. Roommate 1, not sleeping at home. Roommate 2, not sleeping at home. Roommate 3, staying home because of midterm exams. Me. I'm staying at my parents' place. The next morning, I received a frantic text from one of the roommates saying that the roommate with the midterms had been attacked. Apparently, she was in her room studying and heard a noise right outside of her bedroom. When she went out to inspect it, she was greeted by a man walking out of the dead girl's room. I later found out more details about the whole thing from the roommate who was attacked. The man looked rough. Greasy hair and just a dirty, dirty face. When they made eye contact, he held his finger up to his mouth and uttered a shh while smiling. The nail on his finger was long, and his beard was apparently really scraggly and uneven, as if it only grew on certain parts of his face. She screamed out of instinct, even though she knew there was nobody in the house to hear it. He lunged at her as she tried to shut the door, and she wasn't beaten up too badly. He just growled and told her to shut her mouth and said something like, "I'm not gonna rape you, but shut your mouth." He beat her, but not completely unconscious. And then, when he walked out of the girl's room, he went downstairs and walked right out the front door. So, he left the dead girl's room unlocked. My roommate locked herself in her room and called the police, who were there almost immediately. What's pretty creepy about the whole thing is that when they inspected the dead girl's room, they kept asking for clarification. So, nobody has lived in this room for how long? Nobody's been renting this room, right? Did the parents take everything after the girl passed away? The guy had a really sweet setup, actually, and had brought his own small mattress to put over the bed frame. Obviously, the mattress was too small for the bed frame, and he left most of his stuff because he probably didn't expect a confrontation that night. I don't think he knew she'd be there that night because she never was. It probably sucked for him when I moved in because before me, the bastard had the whole house to himself 2 days a week. The police did ask quite a lot of questions and were very interested in hearing my statement about hearing footsteps at night. My 3 roommates and my boyfriend are now convinced that maybe the girl didn't die the way they said she did, and maybe the guy murdered her. But I think the autopsy would have been able to distinguish a murder from a seizure. In their defense, the whole thing is really creepy. We're not really sure how long the guy had been living here, but it's very likely that he'd been there for at least a few months. My theory is that the guy had been climbing in through the window, so it's possible that he was even there at times when all of us were there. The police are really interested in talking to the landlord because they want to know just how the man found out about the vacant room. The landlord is a pretty decent guy, so I don't know if there's anything going on there. I don't even feel an "I told you so" attitude from this whole thing. I think that I'm just glad that the girl is okay because she seemed pretty shaken up. I just wish people were more willing to listen to me when I told them that I thought somebody was coming into our house. Hell, I even said it might be a squatter, which everyone laughed at. This happened very recently, so it might be a while before an update. But as of now, the man has not been found, but the police remain optimistic about finding him. Whatever that means. This has been a pretty terrible month for me, and I don't know if I want to be at this house anymore. I don't have much left on the lease, and I recently lost my job, so it might be best for me to leave the place now. I doubt the guy will come back because all of his stuff has been taken out, but I still find it creepy in this house. I definitely don't spend weekends here anymore. Number 4. A few years ago, my friend Allison and I decided to head to a local beach on a hot summer's day. We were in our preteens, so I had my mother drive us there. When we got there, it was incredibly crowded with little kids playing in the sand and on the nearby jungle gym. Allison and I decided to sit ourselves down in the sand and enjoy the heat while my mom and one of her friends that she invited to come along kept an eye on us. We'd probably been there a few hours, and at this point, the beach started to clear out as it got colder. Allison and I took a break from taking photos of each other planking and sat across from each other chatting about the new Iron Man. I sensed something approaching us and looked over to see this 25-year-old Hispanic man coming up to us and starting to chat with us. At first, everything was fine, but then I noticed he kept nudging closer to us and looking around and behind him. I'll be honest, it kind of freaked me out. He then asked if we had boyfriends or if we liked older men, to which we both replied, no. He scoffed and tried to convince us that we're basically the same age, which we didn't buy at all. While this was happening, Allison and I were texting each other back and forth, frantically trying to figure out how to get this guy to leave. She then told me that I should say, I have to go to the bathroom. After a quick glare in her direction for making me have to do it, I did it, and she quickly said, me too. We both stood up and walked to the brick bathroom house, while he of course followed us, pausing and waiting just outside. When we got inside, we started freaking out to each other about what to do. But when I poked my head out a few minutes later, he was gone. My mother was standing in front of the bathroom with her friend and told us that they noticed the guy acting weird and panicked when he followed us. She then said that her friend told the guy, "Hey, how about you get out of here?" When he tried to tell her that he was our friend from school, she made a scene. She was a small, young woman, but still could be very intimidating. The guy then looked flustered and walked away. Allison and I were relieved after that and decided to go hang out on the jungle gym next to the bathroom house. When I looked to my right before we reached the jungle gym, I felt my stomach drop when I saw the man along with 7 other sketchy guys quickly leaving the area and going into the woods. I don't know what would have happened if the guy convinced us to somehow go somewhere with him. I'm just thankful my mother's friend stepped in and told him to beat it before we ended up on a milk carton. Number 5. At the very end of 2014, I became extremely invested in true crime and spent countless nights researching and reading about all different kinds of crimes, mainly the Columbine school shooting of 1999. I had dabbled in the Tumblr true crime scene in the previous year for the Dokbar Tsarnaev case in 2013, so I ended up returning to it at this same time. The scene was subdivided into many cliques, but there was one that was extremely prevalent and consisted of the fandom's cool kids, Only in real life, they weren't cool at all. They just sat at home, planning mall shootings. But I'll get to that later. Many of the people in that group came across as really shallow, moody, and distant, which one can only expect of people who love murderers. But they were something else. They all lacked compassion and heart, except one boy who we'll call Billy. He was nice and compassionate, but he hid it under a cold and shallow facade which could only be slowly uncovered when you began to get closer to him, which me and many other of my friends eventually did to our pleasure. This boy was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever known. He was straight out of some indie coming-of-age film where the love interest is a bad boy from the wrong side of the tracks. He was just mesmerizing, no matter how fucked up he was. He was just so hard not to love, and I don't think there was one person in the Tumblr true crime scene that didn't love him. In February 2015, he began posting a lot of things on Tumblr about the date of Valentine's Day that year, even going as far as to create a playlist on 8 tracks about what was going to happen on that date, which consisted of basically anything that sounded like trash cans being thrown against a brick wall while someone screams over it. My friends and I began to speculate. Of course, with the state of his blog, one could only assume what would come on that very date, and many people silently caught on and reported it to the authorities. Then, the day before Valentine's Day, authorities showed up at his house and had a showdown with him before he eventually shot himself at the scene. It was revealed that he, along with a couple other people from the Tumblr true crime scene, had been planning a mall shooting on Valentine's Day and could have killed hundreds of people. The entire Tumblr scene was in shock at what had happened, and I eventually grew out of that dark period of my life, being caught up in darkness. And now mine and many of the other friends I made from the Tumblr scene's lives are back on track. Unfortunately, Billy never had the opportunity to fix himself. But fortunately, many other people's lives were saved for the loss of one, which is a gain at the end of the day. Darkness and sadness, let's not meet again, on behalf of myself and many of the other friends I met along the way. May no one else ever do what Billy intended to. Number 6. My high school runs a program where we research people that have died in a local cemetery, then dress up as them and perform a skit in the middle of the night. It's part of a bigger program of celebrating the town's history, and is very popular, so the line for parking is insane, and people often wait in line for an hour or more. This program's been running for 25 years now and is very well known in the community, so there's almost nobody in the town that doesn't know what's happening. This is my second and final year working in the program, and I was in charge of parking this year along with my girlfriend and a few other seniors. So this was the first week of the program on a Friday night, our most popular night. The area of the cemetery that we parked the cars in was filling up pretty quickly, and we were all very busy. At about 8:30 or 9, a blue minivan drove toward me at the spot I was directing and stopped in front of me. This is unusual, since my job is just to direct them around a corner towards someone who helps them into their parking spot. They rolled down the window and called me over. The second their window rolled down, a wave of smoke, not entirely cigarettes, hit me. There was a very thin woman inside coughing at me, and next to her was another woman about her age, I'd say 30s. They stayed staring straight ahead the whole time. Once the driver was done coughing, we had this conversation. Her. I'm here to visit a grave. Me. All right, where's the grave? I can move some barriers for you. Her, obviously not knowing what direction she was going. The grave is that way. She pointed right behind me, an area of the graveyard almost entirely full of really old graves, so I knew if she was looking for a grave, it wasn't that way. Me. All right, I can move this for you, and once you need to leave, let another director know and we can help you out the back gate. Her. Okay, who died? Me. Huh? Her. Who died? I've never seen this many people for a funeral before. I didn't know how to respond, so I just directed her toward the direction she pointed. Keep in mind, this was at 9 p.m. and there were about 500 people here for this event. The woman went about 2 rows back and sat with her friend in front of a very old grave for about 30 minutes, and then got in her car and left without getting anyone's help. Every day past that, she came back to the cemetery at the same time and asked the exact same questions, still wondering who had died. Number 7. This happened several years ago, when I was about 17. I had just gotten my first job at a local pizza joint and sailed by the first few months without incident. One particular night, I was closing shop with my manager, who I'll refer to as Evelyn. She and I were getting close to finishing up, and one of my last tasks was to take out the trash and old used pizza boxes to the dumpster. I got what I could and stepped out the back door, making my way to the dumpster at the opposite end of the parking lot, when I got an odd vibe from just standing out there. When I approached the dumpster, I heard a tiny bit of rustling and something move further behind the dumpster, as if attempting to stay hidden. I get spooked easily, so I warily called to Evelyn while backing away. When my voice resonated in the lot, a tall, thin man springs from behind the dumpster and hauls ass in the opposite direction. I scream and run as fast as I can back into the restaurant. Nearly crying, I explain everything to Evelyn, and after hearing the whole story, she does a quick sweep of the lot, only to find a dirty coat the man had left behind. She assumed the man was homeless and just warned me to be careful next time. A couple weeks later, I'm opening the store and make it home around 2 in the afternoon. My mom shows me a news article she'd found about a man in our area who had abducted 3 teenagers over the course of 4 or 5 months. I immediately thought of the man behind the dumpster. As much as I would have liked for the story to have ended there, it gets worse. Several months later, I'm closing with Evelyn again and another manager, Steve. Around 9 p.m., I saw a man pull into the parking lot, and as he did, he turned his headlights off. I was standing there where you pull pizzas out of the oven.
This is both a personal account and a shared one of my uncle, aunt, cousins, and my mom. My uncle, aunt, and cousins used to live in a house in Terre Haute, Indiana, which was dubbed the Red House. This house was my very first experience dealing with the paranormal, and certainly not the last. My uncle and family moved into this house back in the early 1990s. It was a large 2-story shingle-style house, corner lot, that was painted red with a creepy basement. Most of it was unfinished with dirt floors and rock and stone walls, detached garage and secret room, which I'll get to later. Our first visit to my family's new house was for Christmas in 1991. We were going to drive learn the game around 7th grade. But by the time I made it to high school, we started to hear rumors about kids actually completing it. None of us thought it was true, but none of us ever really knew what would happen either. The thought of someone finishing the game was pretty intriguing.
Were they able to throw a drape over a real ghost? Of course, no one can say much about the legitimacy of this recording, but it is quite interesting to watch nevertheless. And before we proceed any further, I would love to inform you that I started playing creepy games now, and I would love to share this experience with my friends.
Scene. I chalked it all up to a trick of the mind and went to bed. By the time I woke up the next morning, I was certain that what I had thought I'd seen is you. Other than the sleeping child. I scanned the screen for a couple more minutes, unsure of what I had seen.
Where you pull pizzas out of the oven, which was behind only the registers and with a large glass front, and I was clearly able to see the man as he slowly pulled in. I was uneasy, but didn't say much about it as I had work to finish. Half an hour later, I look back and see the man, still with his headlights off, very slowly circling the parking lot. I call Steve over, and after a few long moments of looking out, Steve hurriedly rushes Evelyn and I to the back end of the store, where he tells us not to move. Soon after, the police come rushing into the lot, and the man is arrested. After Evelyn and I come out, Steve explains to me that as he looked out the window, the man parked, opened the trunk of his car, and pulled out a long rope, a cloth, and a large knife. Steve dialed the police as the man circled around the building to the back lot. That man was hoping I would come out there again. I quit that job not long afterward. Number 8. So this actually happened to my mother in the early 1980s when she was about 12 or 13 years old. From the time she was born to about 17 years old, my mother lived in Myanmar, a small Southeast Asian country that is considered one of the poorest nations in the world. That being said, my grandparents were quite wealthy. Not in the sense that they lived in a mansion, but they had a good-sized house in the central city, Yangon. My mother grew up playing in the streets and being allowed to wander about as she pleased. She says this is due to 2 things. 1, my grandparents had her at a very young age, when they were both 17, and this isn't uncommon there, and thus didn't really parent her as strictly as they should have. And 2, contrary to popular belief, poor countries are not always teeming with murderers, rapists, and kidnappers. Myanmar circa 1980 was actually pretty safe, especially in the city parts. It wasn't uncommon to see kids running about in the streets past nightfall. This information is tedious to tell, but all relevant to the story. My mother and her friends, a mixed group of guys and girls, decide to go up to a Buddhist temple at the top of a large mountain. I'm not sure what it's called in English, but it's actually a pretty popular tourist attraction these days. Some may find it odd that their parents let the group of kids go alone, but it was to a holy temple, and once again, it was pretty safe back then. So instead of taking a bus up to the mountaintop, they walk, as my mother says the journey up is actually the most fun part. A lot of people actually choose to walk up as the scenery is unbelievably beautiful and there are ranges of mountains and forest in the surrounding areas. I've actually been to this particular temple myself on a trip back to the country, and at the very top where the temple is located, there are a lot of monkeys. It's weird, but the place is teeming with them. Some of them are chained to trees as tourist attractions, but some run free up and down the roofs. Apparently, back in the 80s, the monkey situation was even worse. They were everywhere, but you couldn't touch them or they'd bite. Anyway, My mom and her friends are about 3/4 up the mountain, and it's midday, as they set out early because the climb takes quite a while. It's almost unbearably hot, but there are vendors set up almost like pit stops that sell water, fruit, hat, fans, etc. In a particularly long stretch of winding road where there's no vendors, my mom and her friends are getting bored. It's been a long day and there's not much else to do at this point. That's why when they turn the corner of a mountain face and see a man holding a monkey perched on his arm like a bird, they stop. My mom says he's a Caucasian, and obviously a Westerner based on his attire, which is strange because tourists usually take the bus straight up. Then he starts speaking broken Burmese to them with a really thick accent. He asks if he can walk the rest of the way with them as he doesn't want to get lost. They say sure, being a bit naive and still in awe of his monkey. The man sees them looking at his monkey and tells them it's actually well trained and that they can play with it if they want. My mom and her friends accept, and for a good portion of the way up, they're entertained by the docile animal. Then, as they reach the top of the mountain, the man points to a car parked in a ditch about 50 feet from the temple gates. He says he's got a lot of trained animals in the car, and that he can show them to the group if they go with him. My grandparents weren't strict with my mom, but they drilled into her head a concept universally known as stranger danger. She was immediately suspicious, as cars weren't allowed to drive up the mountain as the buses made wide turns, and a car could easily be flipped off the mountainside. One boy in the group is very interested and starts to go with the man, but the rest of the group runs to get him back. The man seems very angry at this point and begins pointing at the monkey and yelling to look how cute it is. He then makes a swipe to grab the nearest kid to him, but my mom and her friends scatter and run to the temple entrance. There were a lot of people passing them by, and you'd be surprised just how many people follow a "it's not my problem" motto in these kinds of situations. My mom looks back to see if the man is following them, but he's standing at the car and leaning down to talk to someone in the driver's seat. So they all book it to the temple, and the rest of the trip goes fine as they take a bus on the way down. When she gets home, my mom says she didn't tell her parents as she didn't think it was a big deal. However, she says that if she did report it, the police wouldn't do much as they were, and still are, pretty useless and corrupted. Looking back, my mom says this whole situation was much scarier than she realized at the time, and a couple of things kept sticking out to her. First off, there was someone else in the car, sitting in the driver's seat and waiting to go. The man didn't tell them there was anyone else in the car, but there obviously was. Secondly, the man was just seemingly standing around in the middle of the path, as if he were waiting for someone. And finally, and perhaps most telling of all, Myanmar, like all impoverished countries, has a notorious underground human trafficking trade. My mom's not sure if this is what he wanted, but she knows he definitely had bad intentions. Number 9. This happened when I was about 10 and a half. It had been raining all of that day and evening, and I went to bed at 9 p.m., which was normal bedtime on a school night, and fell asleep almost immediately. I woke up in the middle of the night, which was really weird. I mean, it probably happened twice a year. I was the type of kid to sleep through anything. My dad always said I slept so heavy one day a tornado would carry me away in my sleep. The clock on my nightstand said it was 3 a.m., and the house was completely silent. I realized I was very thirsty, and got up to go get a drink from the kitchen sink. Our kitchen sink was a pretty typical setup. Long counter, with 2 sinks in the middle, some counter space on one side, and a cute little window over the sinks. It was very dark in the house, but I knew my way around and wasn't afraid of the dark, so I didn't bother to turn on a light. I had my drink of water and then decided that I was kinda hungry. I grabbed sandwich fixings out of the fridge and a couple slices of bread and set them up on the counter. I started making my sandwich, feeling my stomach grumble. I reached up and pulled the cord for the overhead light so I could see how much mustard I was putting on my sandwich. Flick. Squirted the mustard on my sandwich. Good to go. I gathered up all the sandwich stuff and reached up to turn the light off. This time, my eyes caught the window and I couldn't help but scream. Ham, cheese, and mustard dropping to the floor, I backed across the room and continued to scream. There was a face in the window. Not your regular face, but the creepiest, crazy-eyed, dirty, methed-out face I'd ever seen. I wanted to run from my parents, but I was afraid to take my eyes off the face, so I just kept screaming. Eventually, my parents came to see what the racket was. My father grabbed a golf club and chased the man out of our yard. We had no idea who the guy was. He wasn't anyone that we'd seen around town, and it didn't seem like he was trying to break in or steal anything. When I got older, I decided he must have just been a creep who happened to be passing by and saw me through the window or something. Whoever he was, he scared the fuck out of a little girl who just wanted a sandwich. Number 10. When I was in middle school, I met a kid named Rob. He was working with a friend of mine. He was being loud and disrupting the class, which caused the teacher to send him to detention after a few complaints. My friend wound up working with me, and Rob was unable to find a new partner because no one wanted to work with him. The class soon ended, and my friend decided to introduce us. I didn't care for him one way or another. However, he seemed to latch on to me because I was so accepting of people. Almost all my friends in middle school would be considered weird or outsiders, so we took who we could get to socialize. Middle school flew by, and I loved to write. Rob complimented me and was always reading what I wrote. In fact, he got in trouble in class because he was reading my work instead of paying attention. To me, it was flattering and an ego boost. I was finally the center of attention for someone. The flattery was something I craved, with me constantly being overshadowed at home and school. Rob and I became friends, but he was very clingy, talking on the phone with me for hours. This was before everyone in school had cell phones, but I'm sure he'd be texting me constantly if these things happened today. I still found him annoying, but I liked the praise too much to cut him off. In hindsight, I was a bitch to him at first. Then high school came around and I moved. I lost contact with a lot of friends. Once again, this is before cell phones and Facebook were everywhere. However, those I had the number of, I talked to constantly. I was having trouble making new friends, and it was a new environment. Then, I heard that Rob hadn't stopped talking about me, how much he missed me, how depressed he was that I wasn't around. To 14-year-old me, this was almost like a declaration of true love. I was so happy that I was so missed. After all, a guy has to be constantly thinking about the girl he loves, right? We started dating, talking on the phone when we could, saying we were boyfriend and girlfriend, etc. He mentioned that he had started drawing and writing, just like me. He'd kept all the pictures I'd drawn for him, and said his stepmom had stolen some of the writing I had let him borrow to read, and refused to give it back. We maybe saw each other twice during the few months we dated. He had suddenly gotten very touchy-feely, and began showing me written erotica. Being as young and religious as I was appalled. This grossed me out, and I expressed that it made me uncomfortable. He merely shrugged and promised not to show it to me again. Then he asked me to hide it because his bitch of a stepmom would take it away from him if he found it. I started to get a nervous feeling in my stomach, but I thought it was just a normal problem. I was terrified of talking to my parents because I had been sneaking around to go see him, saying I was going to a friend's house, but he would be there, albeit in a big group of people. I finally decided to break it off. I called his house after a church meeting, and his mother answered in tears. I asked her what was wrong, and she explained to me that he'd been hauled off to a mental hospital. Apparently, as she put it, he'd been writing disturbing things, but she didn't want to talk about it. I decided to not make it worse and continued to date him until he got back. After that, the calls got more needy, and he would call me all the time once he found out about my cell phone. He called me when I was out with friends, and when I couldn't talk, he'd say, "Okay, I guess I'll go write or something." When I asked to see his writing, he claimed it was embarrassing and wouldn't match up to a professional like me. At this time, the sugar-coated praise had started to annoy me, and I'd become more self-critical in an attempt to improve. He was still acting like we were in middle school when talking, refusing to move on to different topics. But I bit my tongue because I was worried of what would happen if I broke it off with him. It all came crashing down one afternoon when I got a call from him. It was almost summertime, and we were going to make a plan to go swimming and maybe finally lose it to each other, as he jokingly put it. I'd been miserable leading up to it, and I was trying to make him happy. After I hung up, I was immediately called back. I recognized the number as his and wondered what was wrong. "Hello, is this Alice?" a woman answered. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Janice, Rob's stepmother." The stepmother, who he constantly claimed was being a bitch, was stealing everything I'd given him, was trying to keep us apart? My teenage stupidity almost made me hang up on her, but then she followed up with, "You need to cut off all contact with Rob. He's dangerous." Dangerous? How? As it turned out, the real reason Rob had gone to the mental hospital wasn't due to his depression, but because of how his writing had focused on the two of us. He had planned on killing his family first, then having sex with me, before killing my family and the two of us running off together. She read a few excerpts from it, which freaked me out. He went into so much gory detail about how he would mutilate the female members of my family. He'd started to make plans, and had even begun hoarding knives in his room. I ran out of my room screaming for my mother, who snatched my phone from me and talked to Janice. They talked for so long. I remember rocking and pacing, white-knuckled as my mother finally hung up. We went to my father's. The two were separated, something Rob and I had bonded over, and he sat me down and had me tell him the entire story. My parents told me I would pick the direction it would go. I didn't want to press charges because Rob was obviously sick. They agreed, but only on the condition that I would give my phone to them if he ever tried to contact me again. I agreed, too scared to think it through. Luckily, once my parents got involved and criminal charges were threatened, Rob backed off. His mother blamed me for everything, accusing me of stealing her son's virginity, despite us never having sex. She then said I was a horrible person for breaking up with him and lying about everything, despite Janice bringing out the evidence. She then tried to blame Janice, and I told her that I never wanted to hear from her again or I would call the police. Aside from a couple of attempted messages on Facebook, Rob has never contacted me again, and I'm thankful to his stepmother for telling me everything. While nothing got much worse, I realize now how many red flags there were. Bottom line, don't stay with someone out of pity. You never know who may be manipulating you.
Number 11. This is a story I asked my older sister to share about her and my younger sister. This happened about 9 years ago. My mother asked me to go to the shopping center to buy groceries. Not wanting to be by myself, I decided to bring my 4-year-old sister along, because she was cute and made everything fun, even things as mundane as grocery shopping. As I walked through the aisles, I noticed a rugged-looking dark-skinned man. I live in Hawaii, so a really tan homeless-looking guy wasn't all that uncommon. After a few minutes, I keep noticing this guy is almost in every aisle I am. At this point, I'm pretty creeped out, so I hurry to the checkout. I walk out of the store and think that I escaped this man, and think to myself that I was probably just being paranoid. I decide to go to the neighboring drugstore to buy snacks for my baby sister and I. As I walk hand in hand with my sister, looking at all the candies and chips we can buy, lo and behold, that man is there again. Once I saw him again, I knew something was up, so I hurried to the checkout again. This time the man followed us to the counter. As an employee bagged my items, I listened to the creep behind me talk to the cashier, because he had nothing to ring up, so I was very curious as to what he would say. This man asked for a rubber band. A stinking rubber band. Now I am certain he was trying to follow us and stay close, because who in the world asked the cashier for a rubber band? I speed walk to the exit, and I can hear this guy gaining on us. So the second I am outside the store, I pick up my baby sister, whilst having a bunch of groceries on my forearm, and I sprint to my car. I open my passenger door, and practically throw my sister in, not bothering to put her in her car seat. I hurry around the hood of my car, and get into the driver's seat and lock the doors. By the time I lock the doors, I see the man about 100 feet away, slowing down from a running pace into a fast walking pace towards my car. He doesn't make eye contact with me, but as he passes my car, he slaps the hood of my car with his dirty, long fingernailed hand and continued to walk away. Very rattled, I drive home looking in my mirrors and looking over my shoulder a lot. But luckily, I never see this man again. Thankfully, my sister was kind of carefree and clueless, because she didn't seem shaken at all. Thinking about it now, I could have easily just screamed and made a scene, and that probably would have deterred this guy. But when you're in fight or flight mode, you don't have much time to think, I guess. I am glad he didn't get me, and I'm glad I didn't have to find out what his true intentions were. Number 12. This happened a couple years back, but my nephew likes to remind me frequently enough that I still remember it pretty well. A little background. I had a kind of crappy car, with some issues that I was too broke to fix at the time. The car would occasionally die when idling with the AC on, and the driver's window had the propensity to never fully close. Or, when it did, it promptly fell down at least 3 inches. This is important to note later on, which is just as well, because I'm a smoker that can't turn on the AC. Anyways, it was a pretty typical day as I was making the short drive back home after picking my nephew up from preschool. We were about halfway home when I came to a 4-way intersection on one of the back roads. We live right on the border of a farm town. As I rolled up to the stop sign, I looked both ways for traffic and saw a bald Hispanic man in front